That junction's right there.
You all right?
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Good? Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Great. I love this. Thanks, Ed.
Hey, I'm hoping everybody live can hear this. We're about ready to get started. Let me know if you can hear this.
Well, that's what I've been doing. I told you. Yeah, I know. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's what I was trying to do up there. Couldn't get anybody on camera. Oh, no.
I think that's what I'm trying to do.
Stood up and announced your name so you knew who it was.
Oh, Lost Adams.
They can't get this one.
Yeah.
What, say again?
Lost Adams.
But it's going right. Yeah. I do two here. I do this one and I do this one. Yeah.
You once were lost, but now you've been found.
This one you'd be like scouting.
Oh, still
We're staying lost.
Check, 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 check.
I'm getting away from everybody.
No sound?
Yeah, there's a 3-second delay. Little bit.
Where's
Name on there. Did you give this to me?
Do that.
You give this to me? Thank you. Thank you. I'll look for you when I get in, okay?
Let's bring Let's bring it
I told you I'm the old carpet.
Who is the AG now? Really? That's up and left.
around to it? Let me go start up that. We're good.
Yeah, do you want to record yours? Huh? Do you want to record yours? After, since I'm first now, you can record whatever you want. You can record it all. What's that all about? Zoom in. Yeah, you can do that, and I can charge the batteries tonight and record tomorrow.
Okay, are we ready to rock and roll here? All right, I hope when everybody goes home tonight, they're going to forget about COVID and that for a little while and think about the good times you had at the end here. I'm hoping everybody has a really good time tonight. Mark and I have been doing this for 23, 24 years, Mark? 22?
And a voice.
There you go. My wife always says my stories get bigger and better every time I tell them, and so I guess 23 or 24 is not too far off. It's a little bigger and better. 22 years now, and we've never done one in the basin, one of our programs before. This is the first. Won't necessarily be the last, but it might be our last altogether. That, as most of you know, we weren't going to do this up at Moon Lake. We kind of got run out of there, and just after we got run out of there, it flooded anyway. So they really didn't want us up there. I'm telling you, if they divert the water so that flood the campground, and so those of us who even had a camp spot up there had to renew everything and do things a little different. Try to make this happen. Normally we have RSVP. We normally feed people at these. This isn't the first thing that we haven't fed people, but nearly the first. And sometimes although we've done 22 years, we've sometimes done more than one in a year. But we've had bluegrass concerts with world-class, every kind of speaker you can imagine. We just put together whatever we think really is a big interest to people, and I guess none of you would be here tonight if you didn't have topics, at least but we do outlaws. We have family members and people who are experts on outlaws in Utah, treasure hunters. We'll get some of that tonight. But the treasure hunters, we've had treasure hunters that are professionals that do it for a living, and they bring up treasure and cannonballs and all kinds of things that they found, both here in the UNS and people that are deep sea treasure hunters that have the big treasure hunting boats and that. We've had them come and talk, bring up treasure from Spanish galleons and different things, let us handle it, not just look at it, but you can handle a lot of the stuff. We've had everything you can imagine, and they've been great. And a few years ago we started a new program I'll talk about here in a minute, and we're going to do it again here tonight because it's working out really good. Want you to know that a lot of you know Terry Carter over here with the camera standing up. Terry's live streaming this on YouTube right now.
I don't know how good it's doing though.
he has his own channel on there. If you're interested in treasure and giants and Bigfoot and all those kind of unusual things, you probably want to get on YouTube and look up his channel. He has a lot of followers all over, and he travels all over. He goes down to Florida and the Keys and talks to people. He goes all over the place to interview people and sees treasure and things and videotape it and interview people. Very interesting, and he works with a lot of the TV stations that come into Utah. The camera photographing or that, put your hand in front of your face or a coat over your head or something, and I've been promised that they will Photoshop in a Bigfoot for your head or something like that, so you won't be seen nationally potentially, because a lot of this stuff, if we continue these, will go in our advertising for our next one, and you may see your face out there on a channel that are getting 500,000 or 1 million, this kind of thing. A lot of people might be seeing your face, so if you don't want to be seen when this is coming around, put something over your head or something for a minute. So other than that, we've got 3 main speakers tonight. They've asked, because our last speaker, it needs to get dark enough that we can use the screen back here. And so we need to make sure that our first speakers are going to talk long enough for it to get dark. So I've been kind of asked to lead off with a few stories. I can talk for weeks on end. My wife would tell you that, drive her nuts, but I'll probably tell a story or two to start with. And then our invited guest speakers, John Salmon is going to be our first speaker, and he's going to talk about Bigfoot. He's been doing this. How long have you been doing this, John? Yeah. Okay, since 2008, he's been actively looking for them.
Keep looking.
1982 is the first one, and I can tell you, because we've talked and interviewed quite a few people in Utah on Bigfoot. So those of you that are here for Bigfoot, we've seen in our group here, we've had people bring videos and things that are far superior than anything you've ever seen on TV or that of Bigfoot. We've had some great stories, and we'll get some really good ones tonight. and tomorrow. And so John's going to be our first guest speaker, and then we're going to hear from Patsy Sursa, and she's from this area, and she's going to talk about treasure and Spanish and those kinds of things. And this area here, if you don't know it, this area is probably one of the richest places on treasure, Spanish treasure and those kinds of things, probably in the United States, if not in the world. And she's been directly involved with some of that, and she's going to be our second speaker. Greg Gardner, and by the way, he and his wife Yvonne have really helped us out on this particular one, getting set up, since most of us are from out on the Wasatch Front, putting things together and those kinds of things. They have just been invaluable to us, so thank you, Greg and Yvonne, for helping us with that. Greg is going to be our third speaker, and he's going to talk about the history of this area, Moon Lake and this area, and he's also going to talk about treasure in this area. So you'll get a couple of those. And finally, I said that I'd talk about a little bit later, one of the programs we started a few years ago. We're going to do what we call open mic, and that is we're going to invite people to come up and spend just a few minutes telling us a short story of something that's kind of related to what we're doing tonight, either a Spanish treasure story or a Bigfoot story or something. If you go very long, you'll probably get signals from several of us to cut it off. We don't want you, the open mic stories, we don't want going for an hour or 2 hours or something. We want to keep them fairly short. If we really like your short story, then we're probably going to come and visit you at your home or something to interview you, maybe one of our featured speakers soon. But try to condense it into a fairly short story, what you're going to tell us. And like I say, we'll give you some signals if it's time to cut it off so that we can have more people talk. But be thinking about every family. It may not be you personally, but it might be an aunt or an uncle or a mother or father or something. Every family's got great stories. A bunch of us came up yesterday and went over to Greg's and had a barbecue. We had about 30 people there. I didn't take a count, but probably about 30 people there. And in the time that I was there, and then when I swung by this morning to see who was there and what they were talking about, I've already had a bunch of people come up to me and ask if I was Kent. By the way, my name's Kent Smith, for those that don't know. And I said, yeah, and I can't even tell you how many stories I've heard in the last 2 days, but I've got hundreds of stories myself, and I've got several diaries full. I've got multiple drawers full of original maps to treasure and all kinds of things. The originals, most of the people that have drawn them for me and that are dead now. Those kinds of things. I've got about, I think, over 9 diaries full of information from people that have given me, and most of them are dead now, on treasure and different things and that. I have people ask me all the time to write books. I've started one, but for personal reasons, I haven't finished any of them yet, and I'm not sure if I will. But there's tons of information out there, and we're anxious to hear from our guest speakers and also from those that come up to open mic. Couple of things we want to make you aware of. We have purposely, our 22 years that we've been doing all these, we have tried to keep them basically free. When we feed people, we usually ask for a $7 donation, but that includes your food and your evening of entertainment. And we have some people complain about that we're ripping them off, and I thought, wow, you probably ought to, instead of coming up here, you need to take your family down to the movie theater and spend $200 to get you a bag of popcorn for everybody and a drink and go see a movie instead of $7 for a nice meal. We're not talking hot dogs, we're talking pulled pork where we bought the whole pig and cooked it. Took 2 weeks to set up the meal with the pigs and things like that, and then all kinds of things to eat, and people complaining that our $7 were just a big rip-off group. But Mark and I don't make any profit on it. We usually pay out of pocket because there are expenses involved, and that's what I'm getting to here. Since we got kicked out of Moon Lake, our expenses went up considerably. We had to rent this park. We had to rent the porta-johns to come in. There's some out here if you need them. There's some over this way. We did our advertising, some commercial advertising, those kind of things. And so we're up into $600, $700, $800 out of pocket and putting this on for it for free. So we don't ask for tickets or anything like that. Feel free to sit there in your chair and enjoy this and go home and hopefully say what enjoyable time you had. But we do encourage donations if you feel so inclined. There's a bucket right here on the edge of the stage for donations, and there's another one over here by the vendors for donations. If you feel like your entertainment's worth a bunch, feel free, and we'd appreciate donation to help offset what's going out of our obviously, if we end up paying $600-800 to put on a free event, this will probably be our last one, kind of thing. And it's not the first time we've had expenses. We always have them, but please donate if you feel so inclined, so that we can continue these. If this turns out real good, which I hope it does, then it probably won't be our last one in the Uinta Basin either, whether we have them up here or at the convention center or something. But we potentially can keep doing them. Usually is what happens if you come to an area like this and do it. If people really like it, word of mouth spreads real fast, and everybody goes, man, instead of going to that movie, that stupid movie that I paid $200 for, I should have gone up there and heard about treasure and Bigfoot and stuff and that. And then if we do another one, we get a lot more. And we had no idea tonight if we were going to have another rock concert of the 60s and have 600,000 people show up. We did get calls from out of the country, people that said they were coming or wanted to come, and quite a few from all over the U.S., which we've had them fly in from Hawaii, come in from the state of Washington, the state of New York. We've had them come to some of our 22 years from a lot of different places and that, but it's quite a few books. Sally and I are in the process of moving to a new home, and I've got so many books and that, so we've been trying to thin the herd, and I've been selling them by the truckload at home, and I brought a few that people might be interested in, and they haven't, and the idea was to tell you they're for sale right here, and I've got 2 left. People have caught me and bought everything I had prior to me getting up here and saying, here, I got a stack of books for sale. There's 2 left. So one is Lost Treasures on the Old Spanish Trail by George Thompson, and the other one is The Gold of Carrie Chenab by Carrie Ross Bourne and Lisa Lee Bourne. I'm asking $20 a piece. If anybody's interested in those, you can get those from me. Let's see here.
You snoozed, you lose. Buddy just brought you some books.
And I want one of them Bigfoot things.
We'll send them to your house.
That is good. Sorry, guys, I didn't really bring any books. I don't want anybody mad at me. All right, so now that we've heard all the boring stuff, you probably slept through the whole thing. Please patronize our vendors. So if we do another one here in the basin, we'll have them wanting to come back and support us. It could get bigger and better. It might be reduced to 1 day. It might be 2 days, whatever. But I'll guarantee you, we've been doing it for 22 years, and the reason we have is because these turn out fantastic. Everybody loves them. They pester us all year long. When's your next one going to be? Okay, so they asked me to start out by telling a couple of stories, simply because I'm a windbag and I know a lot of stories, and they want this to stretch out till the sun goes down and gets dark. Not for all our speakers, but for our last speaker. So I'll tell you a couple of stories to get you started. Now, this is also kind of similar to what we expect from when you come up for the open mic, except you got to condense it way down to just a few minutes, and then I'll tell more of the full stories. But I'm going to tell some stories for this area. I know stories all over the state, and Sally and I take groups on tours of private petroglyphs and ancient sites and that all over the state. We'd have 3 or 4 hands come up from Wasatch Front or something. Who thinks that they traveled the furthest to get here? You got here and one over here and one back there. Tell us who came.
Dallas, Fort Washington, 80 miles east of Portland, Oregon.
80 miles east of Portland, Oregon. Okay? Kansas City. Okay? They got you beat, we'll give you full refund. Full refund. Anybody else that we missed that travel long ways, whether it's the longest or not, out of the state of Utah? Fort Worth, Texas. Pretty impressive. Thank you guys for coming. Lava Hot Springs, Idaho. We're going to come up and stay at your place and go swimming. All right. Well, we sure appreciate you folks coming out and supporting us. Like I said, we didn't know if we were going to have 2 people here or 100,000 people here. We were a little bit afraid that if we got more towards the 100,000, we were going to be in big trouble. Hang on here, Mike. What we're doing tonight during the thing, we'll have little breaks between speakers and that, but get over there and get your name and your email address so that we can contact you and let you know about some of our events. So we've talked about doing some big ones in this, and we've got far enough along to talk to the people that actually rent the big convention centers and that, and have the jumbo screens, several of them, where people can see the speakers on these giant screens and all the different things. And the advertising people that do the billboards along the freeways have talked with us and all those kind of things, and we got pretty close to doing it. But which direction are we talking from here for Rock Creek? Isn't it about north of us? Little bit west and north? Okay, Rock Creek area is a really hot spot for Spanish stuff, and there's a lot of Indian stuff too. You got to be careful because a lot of that area is on Indian ground. And if you go out there on Indian ground and start doing stuff, guess what? Not only do you go to Indian jail, but they'll confiscate your vehicles and stuff if you're doing things you're not supposed to, and you'll never get them back. And that being said, I'll tell you one little story to start with. We'll tell a few. I had a friend story. I think he lived in Roosevelt, I think, and he said he had a little Toyota pickup truck, and he says it was just held together by elastic bands, baling wire, a little bit of duct tape, and some prayer probably kept the thing from coming to pieces as he's driving down the road. And so he finally reached a point where he says, hey, I know I've got to get another truck. So he started looking at all the used car dealerships, Roosevelt, Vernal, Roosevelt, and Duchesne, and going to all the used dealerships and not looking for a vehicle. He finally found one that was in pretty good shape, it was nearly new, and it fit his price range and everything, and so he thought, well, I'm probably going to get that one. All of a sudden, he got invited, a couple of Indians. Is there any Indians here today? Okay. If I'm insulting you by calling you Indian, I don't know what to call them. Not as white as the rest of us, or we could call them natives, or we could call them indigenous people, or 100 other things, and somebody'd be offended. I hope Indian doesn't offend you because I love Indian stuff and Indians. My mom used to work with them her whole life and that, and I wish I'd got to know a bunch more of them than I did. But in the basin here too, by the way, she was invited to funerals all the time. She came up to about here on me, and my mom, she had scoliosis when she was young, and she'd get shorter every year, and she was a little short gal. And the police used to pull her over all the time because she'd sit on a big hard pillow about this thick in her car, and then she'd look between the steering wheel and the dash as she drove down the road, and the police would pull her over all the time, thought she was about a 10-year-old or something driving down the road, but anyway, she'd get invited to their funerals all the time because they all knew her really good and liked her. Just so you'll know what she did, she was pretty high up in the welfare system in the state of Utah, and there's a lot of Indians out here on the reservation that were on welfare, and they'd come to her office all the time to sign paperwork and to get welfare and that, and they all got to know her pretty good, and they liked my mom, and so they'd invite her to funerals and things like that, and she'd go to a funeral. Well, part of their funeral, and I hope this isn't saying something I shouldn't about their funerals, but part of their funeral was when they get them in the hole in the ground, then they all confess anything that they might have ever done bad to that family or that person. You confess it right there at the open grave. And then after everybody's through confessing anything you may have done, you borrowed a hammer and you never returned, anything that you did bad, and then they would, at the very end, everybody has to jump over the grave, open grave. And my mom was so little, she'd come home and she'd say, man, I knew this time I was going to go right in the grave with the casket and stuff and that. But anyway, now what was I talking about? I'm getting so old. Okay, the truck. So he gets this truck and he hasn't bought it yet, but he's getting really close to buying it, and it's like going to be the next day or something. And two Indians that he knows, they're not close friends, but he knows who they are. They show up at his door and they say, "Come with us." And so he goes out and climbs in with them, and away they go. And they go up Rock Creek somewhere there, and they dig up some Spanish armor and probably some gold bars and stuff, a bunch of stuff, Spanish stuff, and show it to him. And then they put it back down and bury it up early in the morning until about dark, off road. Now you don't, us white people, I hope I didn't offend anybody, and it would go for any of you, if you're not Indian, would be offensive to the tribe, and I don't, whether they're here or not, the Ute tribe and that, I don't want to offend them or say things that I shouldn't. So I won't tell you some of the stuff, but I'll tell you a few stories. And they showed me some sacred burial grounds and told me the story behind them, and they showed me some other things I can't talk about. I had a GPS with me, and I had my camera equipment. We have some nice camera equipment, the wife and I, and I didn't get them out of the case the whole day, because I figured as soon as I clicked the button to give me a waypoint on my GPS that I could match up on digital maps or whatever, or the first photograph that I took of things I was showing, that would probably be the end of our day, and they'd take me home. So I didn't take anything out, but how many of you are familiar with, well, before I tell, remind me if I forget, I'm getting old. I'm going to tell you a story about Carrie Shanab, and that they told me on that particular trip, but I'll tell you another one first. So anyway, one of the things that I was real impressed with, whoops, we lost power. Can you hear me still? Lost power. Back on.
Why don't we get a chair and just sit right here so you don't have to keep going back?
Okay, can you hear me?
Jan or Yas?
Lights on here, so we're on. I think we're on, but let me see. Test. Okay, we're back, we're good. Okay, so, no, well, this one isn't a time limit one. When you organize the thing, we get to set the rules, whatever we want. So, okay, so there's some lines right there, came right down where the second mission was, and you can really still see it real easy. And so we're sitting there eating our sandwich and having lunch and so forth, and they're telling me some stories, and they point out there's a hill, or in Utah we call it a hill. If you're back east, it would be a huge ski mountain, but here it's a little hill. But it looked kind of like a giant anthill coming up like this, and it rose up off the floor of the valley there, maybe a couple hundred feet high to the point. And they says the Indians still call that Boom Hill. And that was Boom Hill, and the reason they called it Boom Hill was because the Spaniards had a great big cannon set right on top of that hill. And on top of it, because it was real flat out around, kind of like this country, if you look around out here, they could see Indians coming and going all over the place. And whenever they'd see a bunch of Indians, they'd touch off the cannon, and being down there in Rock Creek, it would echo all over through there when they'd shoot the cannon off. And that was just to tell the Indians that, hey, we got cannons and guns and stuff, and don't get out of line because we can handle you. And so that was kind of to scare the Indians, and they'd set that off and the boom and it would echo. And so the Indians still today call that Boom Hill. A little bit beyond that, there was a great big bowl. It had, it went up on a hill and ended up like a great big earthen bowl, great big. It was like, as wide maybe as this whole park or something, with a rim around the top. But in the north end, you would come in at ground level of the lowest part of the bowl, and if you went straight throughout the south end, it was cut like a V, and you could go right out the south end without having to go up over the hill. Well, the biggest massacre of Spaniards, there was 3 major ones that I know of, a lot of smaller ones, but 3 major massacres where the Indians killed all the Spaniards that were up here slaving them all and mining and that. The biggest one that I know of that took place in Utah took place right at that bowl. So they were telling me about it, and they says the Spaniards came down that trail at the end of the season. They didn't want to stay here in the winter time because we get lots of snow and cold and they can't do anything. So they'll get up all their gold and everything they've got, and they'll head south, and then they'll come back again in the summer. So they were coming down with all their slaves, peons, padres, all the people that they were required by Spanish law to have with them, or that they needed for their mining operation. They come down off there, and they come out right 100 feet from the Spanish mission there. Well, there's padres or whatever in the Spanish mission, and they stopped them, and they says, hey, the Indians are planning an ambush for you. They're going to kill y'all. And they says, we got cannons, we got they had quite a few armed soldiers with them, and they says, we're not afraid of them. We've got guns and cannons and everything, and we couldn't care less. And so they kept going, and so they went down into that big bowl, and right when they got in the middle of it, all of a sudden the Indians started boiling over the top on both sides of them. The braves coming down to fight them, and the women and children sitting along the rim at the top playing drums and chanting. And the battle began. And they start fighting. They had no idea that there was going to be as many Indians as they were. It's kind of the Custer's last stand thing, and that way more Indians than they expected. And it didn't take them long to see that it was a losing proposition. They were not going to win the battle. And they decided, okay, we're going to make a run for it. If we can make it through that gap on the south end and get the Indians chasing behind us, we've got cannons and different things, and we can win this battle and we can get away. So they took off as fast as they could, trying to make it down through the south gap, the exit out of that bowl. Well, as they approached the gap, all of a sudden a whole bunch of Indians come into the gap. They were waiting for them basically, and plugged that gap up and filled it up so they couldn't go through there. And so they continued the battle, and they were losing. And so they started digging foxholes. I was taking out and showing you can still see all the foxholes, quite a few of them. You can see the indentions in the ground where they dug in, and they decided that, hey, if we get in some foxholes and that, then we can do all right. Well, the Indians aren't stupid. They never have been. We like to portray them on TV shows and as not being too bright sometimes, but they always have been pretty sharp in that. Well, they could see once they were getting foxholes and that they'd be able to reload their guns and all the different things, and it wouldn't be that great of a battle. So the Indians backed off, but they had them surrounded, and so they had to stay in the foxholes. They kept them there for 3 days, no food or water in their foxholes, and then they finally sent an Indian down, and they said, surrender to us. And about half of them surrendered, and they took them up on the hillside where they could see them and skinned them all alive. And so there went half of their people were skinned alive in front of them where they could see it. The other ones obviously said, we're not surrendering. So they fought to the death. They killed all of them. They killed everybody. They killed every animal. They did that on purpose. They killed every animal. They killed every slave, peon, Spanish soldier. Everybody that was in the group were killed. And then they had quite a bit of gold with them. A lot of it was in flake and nugget natural form. And then they had 72 bars with them. Bars were about this long and like this wide, this long, pretty good sized bars, and they actually had them in crates. They put 4 bars to a wooden crate, and that's how they were hauling them. And then they had about the equivalent in raw gold that they had not melted down and put it in ingots or whatever. And so they took all the animals and all the people and all the raw gold, and one of their major Indian trails up through Rock Creek, they took them in the bottom of a little ravine there, put everything in there, and then they had the women and children come out with sticks and that, and break loose all the caliche and everything and bury everything right there under the trail, so the Indians would always walk right over the trail. When the federal government years later, I don't know how many years ago, they come in and run a road up there. They built a big reservoir up at the top now and everything. But they told them where they could run the road, and they made them run the road right over the top of the burial with the raw gold and all the bodies and everything. So if you drive up Rock Creek, you'll go right over the top of all that stuff. They took the 72 gold bars, and they took it up to a place, and they took it over to a little ravine, which they took me and showed me, and they threw it all out right there. They didn't bury it or anything. They just threw it out in the ravine. It might have an inch of dust over it now after hundreds of years or whatever, and that, but it was never buried or anything. It's just put up there. And they showed me where that point was, and they says that's where all the gold bars sit right there. And so that was one of my stories. I'll tell, because a lot of you know Kerry Shanob, and the Ute Indians will tell you there's no such thing. They didn't name any mine Kerry Shanob. That's a white man thing, and that the words probably exist and that and mean certain things, but it wasn't given to the mine by the Indians themselves. And I've heard that from multiple sources, but we got talking about that, so if I used that term, they knew what I was talking about. They did anyway. And so right after we had lunch, we were just starting to move again in the truck, and we were going to go look at some more stuff for the afternoon and that. And I said, you know what? I says, I've got 3 different books in my library that all talk about Kerry Shanob, and the authors, all 3 different authors, all claim they've been inside Kerry Shanob. And that all 3 of them give a visual description of what they saw when they were in Kerry Shanob. And I says, all the descriptions vary so much that if any one of the 3 have been inside Kerry Shanob, only one of them could have been in there, because their descriptions are too much different. And I asked him, I says, are you familiar with the books and the authors and everything? They says, yeah, we know all about it. We know the descriptions. We know who the authors are and everything. And I says, do you think any one of the 3 have been inside? And he turned to me and said, all the things I showed you this morning and all the things I'll show you this afternoon, he says, one thing I can't talk about is that particular sacred mine. And he says, I promised the tribal elders and that I won't talk about it. And I says, hey, that's fine with me. I don't want to step on toes or cause any kind of problem. Let's just go do whatever we're going to do. So I shut up about it. So we're driving around looking at some stuff. And a little later on that day, we were driving along, and he says, you see those ledges and that up in there? And I says, yeah. He says, that's where it's at. So I might be the only white man, I don't know, that kind of knows where that's at, according to the Indians, and what they claim is the biggest sacred mine in that. But and you couldn't see the mine; you'd have to go up in there, up on top, and that. But I kept thinking, oh, if we ever have another war with the Indians or something like that, then I can go up there and spend some time. But anyway, Mark, where are you? Raise your hand. Oh, there he is. You want me to go longer, or what do you think? I guess I can always fill in later if we need to get it dark. Should we keep going? Should we bring up our speakers? All right, we're gonna bring up our speakers, and John Salmon's going to be our first one, and he'll be talking about Bigfoot. After he's done, we'll give you a short break before we get another speaker, and give you all a chance to go over here and buy some barbecue and support all our vendors and everything. But let's big round of applause. Let's bring John Salmon up. Thanks, John. Go ahead.
Do you need anything up there? Or you
No, I'm old. I have paper. My name is John Salmon. I'm going to kind of give a little bit of brief background on myself and how I got onto the subject. Back in the early 80s, when I was 18 years old, we went on a trip up in the backcountry of Wyoming in the Snake River drainage. And this particular area, you have to drive 20 miles in, and it's a 6-mile hike back to this area. And what happened occurred actually even more remote than that. But anyway, what we ended up finding, we found over 100 footprints in a mudslide that was like rock clay that had just come down. I feel like I'm echoing, so I'll step back a little bit. And at the time of being 18 years old, you're dumb, you're a teenager, and you're looking at all this stuff. But how we discovered it is at the bottom of the mudslide, we discovered elk track, deer, moose, black bear, and half the group found it before I was showing it, but they went up this path and they had found all these tracks. But there was a large male and what we think was a female and an adolescent, but they wove through, and that's kind of what started the journey for me. But at that particular time in my life, I was terrified of the subject. I had never entertained the fact of Bigfoot up until that time, and I was terrified. I was a big game hunter. The mountains at night were never the same for me, and so I was like, no, I don't like this subject. We told a couple people back then.
You're going to raise your mics.
All right.
You're too tall for us.
I can go like this.
You know, that probably isn't the greatest thing in the world for you to bend over.
That's all right.
Raise somebody's up.
Yeah, there you go. All right. All right, thanks. So another thing too is like I said, I hunted mule deer. I've hunted mule deer for decades, but I also grew up in Yellowstone. My dad owned a motel in Yellowstone, so I was always out in the mountains. I did a lot of dumb things in Yellowstone Park as a teenager. So I was very familiar with the outdoors, and so it kind of altered the outdoors for me because I couldn't deny what I saw. My mom was an art teacher for over 20 years, so I was very familiar with detail and art, and I actually got down in the footprints. I could find the displacement of the toes on each print, but the thing that struck me was it was out in the middle of nowhere, and who would fake this? And once upon a time I was very athletic, and I couldn't follow the large set, but the large set would meander, and the other two would stay together, and they'd kind of meet. But anyway, so fast forward, there's a lot of other weird things that occurred there that over the years we've talked about and kind of rewind and go, did you remember this? And anyway, so fast forward to the mid-90s, I'm up by Bald Mountain in the Uintas, and I find a track line. And I didn't tell my family probably until about 3 or 4 years ago. And I thought, you gotta be kidding me, they're here too? And so that kind of altered the Uintas for me too. And then fast forward a little bit more, in the year 2007, the BFRO, Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, had an expedition in Utah. And a friend of mine went on it, told me about after the fact, and I thought, and I never looked up the topic because I wasn't interested in it. But he went on this and told me a lot of the stories that occurred there and some personal things that happened to him. And I thought, you gotta be kidding me, there's people who go out and look for these things? And so I go, I wanna go. So what we did is we scheduled ourselves to go on a bunch of expeditions the following year in 2008. And so our first expedition was in California. We went to California, and we were kind of used as guinea pigs, but so we went there. A little bit later, some things occurred there. A little bit later, I went to the Washington Olympic Peninsula expedition. Met an individual, and so we would start calling on individuals and doing things in Utah and interviewing and submitting things. And we also did Montana because Montana didn't have an investigator at the time. And then all of a sudden in the spring of 2009, I'm now an organizer for the BFRO. So I'm starting to schedule and help organize the 2009 Utah expedition. And a friend of mine, we wanted to be more adept. I mean, we were outdoorsmen, but I know now I wasn't much of a tracker, and I'm still not much of a tracker, but so we flew some trackers in. We flew two in from Georgia, and we flew one in from Washington. The two from Georgia are with a group called Enigma, and they trained they were spec ops, but they trained search and rescue down there. But the unique thing about them is they had an emphasis on tracking Bigfoot. So they showed us a lot of different things that Squatch did. They showed us track lines, they showed us deer kills, they showed us dog kills, and various things, and then they taught us how to track. We actually, during our night session, believe it or not, it's easier to track at night than it is day because you can control your light source. But during our night session, we actually had activity up there, so that was really interesting. And then we had our 2009 expedition. I also helped organize the 2010, I organized the 2010 Utah expedition. And then since then, I also went on several, I went to the Wyoming, I went back to California several times. I helped the California BFO out there. And then now I've just been doing it mainly with family and friends. We started a group, just a local group that's mostly family and friends called the Utah Squatching Group. If you want to see some of the stuff we do, we have an Instagram page, we have a Facebook page. So we did all that, and what I want to talk about, at least first, and I'll get into some personal stories, is there's some aspects that through the years of doing this, I don't hear talked about much at events like this. It's historical references before the years of 1960, in the 60s before Bigfoot, the name Bigfoot was coined. My sons have done a couple papers on it for college, and they did some research, and I kind of pointed them in the direction, but they did a lot of research. In fact, one of them is from a French explorer, and my oldest son, his friend speaks French, and actually had to translate the diary of this individual. And he says it was very difficult because the French was so old. So if you bear with me, I'm going to read a few stories, and then I'll get into some personal experiences. But in 1540, a group of conquistadors traveling in what now is Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, mentioned in their journals, they came to a province of exceedingly tall and strong men like giants. These people of Castaneda called them live in straw huts under the ground and were capable of 400 weight on their head. The tribe ended up helping the Spaniards cross the river. During the crossing, the tribe tried to fight the explorers and ended up running away at the end. Another group of conquistadors mentioned something of the same nature. There was a race of giants from 10 to 11 palms high, which is around 7 feet. And the conquistadors were a completely different part of the country, but those guys. Another one, Spanish settlement in the Florida province, Hernando de Soto, and forgive me of my pronunciation, was another noble conquistador that mentioned giants in his journal from his explorations in the Americas. His entire journal is full of references to the giant people that interacted with Native Americans. In 1603, there was a French explorer by the name of Samuel de Champlain. That was a fake on my part. But anyway, he stated that he had encountered a Gaugou while exploring the Americas near St. Lawrence River, that is near modern-day New York State, and they were a savage giant and described that they could eat men whole. The London Times had an article published in 1785 stating the following: there has lately arrived in France from America a wild man who was caught in the woods 200 miles of woods by a party of Indians. They had seen him several times, but he was so swift of foot that they could by no means get up with him. He is nearly 7 feet tall, covered with hair, but has little appearance of understanding, and is remarkably sullen and interactable. When he was taken, half a bear was found lying beside him, which he had killed. Jose Marino Manzina was a botanist who accomplished Juan Francisco de la. Anyway, if you want to see the notes later, you can come and we have the bibliography on all this. Do a survey of the indigenous people in 1792. They voyaged up to British Columbia to conduct their research. Mentioned the following about his travels. One does not know what to say about Matlock, inhabiting the mountainous country, of whom all have an unspeakable terror. They figure that it has a monstrous body, all covered with black animal hair, the head like a human, the arms very large, and the toes and fingers armed with long curved nails. His howl fell to the ground those who hear him. Lewis and Clark wrote on August 14th, 1805, Lewis specifically quoted getting directions from a Native American chieftain and was warned to avoid a certain mountains. Living there was a tribe of bear-like people who they called broken moccasins because their print looked like wore either broken moccasins or no shoes at all. This tribe of people were known to hide in the rocks and ambush people, eating their horses and killing men. Even getting close to the tribe ran the risk of broken moccasins sneaking into the travelers' camp, stealing their horses. When there were no travelers to rob, the tribe lived off roots in the rocky land. In 1865, ecologist George Gibbs was conducting a survey in the Washington Territory and wrote in his journal, the Teisco are described as giant-sized, their feet 18 inches long and shaped like a bear. They wore no clothes, but the body is covered with hair like that of a dog, only not so thick. They are said to live in mountainous in holes in the ground and smell badly. They come down chiefly in the fishing season, at which time the Indians are excessively afraid of them. Their voices are like that of owls, and they possess the power of charming, so that those hearing them become demented or fall down to swoon. In 1912, the New York Times published an article that states there are 18 giant skeletons found in Madison, Wisconsin. They state that they were under assumption that they were men, but the skeletons were too large to be men-like. The skulls were very large and dominant ape-like features. So there's a lot. I just want to emphasize that there's a lot of information out there, especially if you go into the Smithsonian and their paperwork and you're willing to dig. It's hard to digitally search for it because it's just not named conveniently. And one thing this isn't Bigfoot related, but it's a really cool story, and it's something I came across, and it's partly because I read Louis L'Amour's book. I don't remember the name of the book, but he talked about woolly mammoths. And he said that they existed about 350 years ago. So I was like, okay, that's new to me. So I went and found, it took me a while to find it, but there's actually an entry, a report from the Bureau of Ethnology by James H. Howard reports that the Ponca tribe who live in the vicinity of the Yankton, South Dakota, used to go on what they called the Wild Hunt. On one of these trips, perhaps the last one, no earlier than 1600s, but more likely in the 1700s, they killed a mastodon near Ryobi, Nebraska. Their name for the animal was Pashnuta, which means long nose. They also killed something else which would live in holes underground, and it was described as a giant land sloth, which they called Wakadabi. This animal was long-bodied, had forked feet, yellow hair, and about 8 feet tall and about 40 feet long. So there's a lot of information out there that you just don't hear normally. And so I'd encourage you, if you're really interested in the topic, there's a lot of Smithsonian old paperwork and old documents you can go through. Now I'll jump into some personal stories. So on one of the expeditions in California that I was on, we went to California. At the time, I was an organizer, and the California BFO team needed some help guiding some people out. So my friend and I, that were both, he's also an investigator too at the time, and an organizer, we were asked to guide some people out. And we had, prior to that, we had kind of researched and knew some of the areas potentially that they were going to potentially go. He was lucky enough that he went there, and I went somewhere else. Well, later on, I found out that his group had watched a subject for 55 minutes in a thermal until. And one of the things that was interesting is when I was going down there, I could see that something large was moving logs and had been traversing this particular area. Nothing definitive, nothing really stuck out to me. But as I'm going down there, I'm yelling back up to him, to have him guide me to where I was at. And all of a sudden I get down there and it was all of a sudden clear. And everything had been pushed away. It was this open area. I was like, and I started yelling to them, is this it? And they said, yeah. And what the subject did is, for the 55 minutes, it would move from one point to another and back and forth. The whole time it was down there. And they were observing, sorry if my voice is shaking, but it was going back and forth. And so what I ended up finding down there is all the debris had been pushed away. It was down to the bare earth, and there was a mound on one side and a mound on the other. And so I went and stood in the mound, and I asked, was this one of the locations that I was standing? They said, yes. I went over to the other mound, and I stood in that one. Well, the interesting thing about those two mounds is I could see this trail where people would frequent perfectly. But the only way they could see where I was standing is if through the thermal they could see my heat signature. And they determined by the size and by my relative size and just their memory recollection that it was probably at least, we figured in the range of probably 8 feet, 8.5, and about, if you were to triple my mass, is about how big the subject was. Well, as I'm looking down there, I actually find the track line of where the subject came up. It had so the ball year print, it had a 7.5-inch wide ball. It was in the duff and the pine needle, so I couldn't cast it. And the stride from hill to toe was 5.5 feet. And the subject had come up. I was on a time crunch at that particular time because I was supposed to teach some rudimentary tracking and some casting classes. And so we went back to the local California guys and told them of this area. So I don't know what they did after the fact. I didn't follow up. I told them, if you guys get a trail cam there, whatever it is, it frequents this area all the time. It's very well used. It's a path that comes in there, and it's something that you guys need to be aware of. Well, the interesting thing is we had made friends with a couple guys from the Midwest who were sheriffs, and they were about 6'5", both of them, and they were really tall individuals. And one of the things I learned on expeditions is that you don't tell a lot of people what you're doing, because then you can have more controlled situations, and you don't have things that kind of get tainted, so to speak. So we told these two guys we'd become friends with. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to go out early one morning, because most of our stuff took place at night. We'd go out at night and things like that. So they went out early in the morning. They'd actually set up a camera on the beginning of the trailhead, and they leave. And I can't remember how long after they leave, you see a subject peek out, see the camera, and peek back in. And I actually just found that video just recently on my computer. But yeah, it's about, they're 6'5", and it's about, and by the tree, if you look at the trees and stuff, their heads would have came up to here on the subject. But it just peeked out like this, saw the camera and went back. So that was interesting too. And there's a lot of these areas that have this type of situation. So this next story it's Bigfoot related, but it's just kind of funny, so I just want to tell it. So on the 2009 expedition, we were going to go to the Wyoming one shortly after. So the BFRO left me a lot of their thermal equipment. Well, one of the thermal pieces is a vehicle-mounted, we used to call it the R2 unit, because it's a big dome, and it magnetized to the top of my Ford, and we magnetized it. The operator would be inside the vehicle, and you could use the thermal imager, and I'll tell you, it was sweet. It was a sweet setup. We also had 3rd-gen night vision and a couple of handheld thermals, and my task was to be the courier pigeon and take them up to the Wyoming expedition. So anyway, I had family. They'd never looked through thermals at the time, and so we took them up to Farmington Flats by Francis Peak, where the domes are. If you live in the Wasatch Front, there's some radar domes up there. So we took them up to Farmington Flats, and we're sitting there and looking around, and we see a couple people trying to find parties up there, and we're watching through the thermals, and all of a sudden I see these lights come in. I'm going, wait a minute, why are they coming that way? That's like the worst possible way to come into this where we're sitting. As they're getting closer, I see that's a Davis County Sheriff. I'm going, okay, this is going to be fun. And so the Davis County Sheriff pulls up, and the passenger, there's two of them, the passenger rolls his window and goes, where does this road lead? I'm going, this has to be a trick question. If you're driving in the middle of the night and you're up on this road, okay, what's going on here? And I was like, it leads back to Bountiful Campground. You can drive out that way. I'm thinking, why don't you know where you're at? And so they ask us, and they see the R2 unit on there. And incidentally, that son right there was younger, and he was actually following the sheriffs with the R2 unit, and it makes a loud humming noise and whirs and everything as it's moving. And so, me being the kind of smarty pants I was, he goes, so what are you guys doing here? I said, looking for Bigfoot. Both doors on the vehicle open up. They both get out and go, no, seriously, what are you doing? No, looking for Bigfoot. And it's like, I happened to be in the Deseret News on the front page for that expedition. So I had a copy of the Deseret News, and so I had to hand it to the sheriffs to tell them that I'm really looking for Bigfoot. And so after they saw that, they go, okay, they believe this. So we had a fun time with the sheriff, showing the thermals, but the whole entire time as the sheriffs are walking around, my son's following them with the thermal. I'm like, Jake, knock it off. But so that was fun, but I thought, no. I don't know. And so that was interesting. It was just a funny story that occurred. And another story, I don't know how long, but another story was last year, my friend who is the investigator was up in the high Uintas and actually found a bunch of tracks. And he came back and told me, so we hiked down there and to check them out. And he said that more than likely he thinks there were Bigfoot tracks. And so we get up there. The tracks were about the size of my footprint, but there was hundreds of them around this small lake. And whatever it was, the subject had actually built little structures and things like that. And I wasn't 100% sure because there were some that looked like it had a mid-tarsal break where in the mud it would squish the mud. We ended up making several casts, which I don't know why, but I forgot to bring them. There are pictures of them on Utah Squatching Group on Instagram. I forgot to bring them, but we ended up doing it. But the whole time I wasn't sold until we found the track line to where the subject had come in from the timber. And this particular area is well known for Bigfoot activity. In fact, a lot of weird Bigfoot activity. And but the subject had come in. The irony was, there was a lot of lessons learned. So we had made out of cast, we ran out of cast material, and we were on the side of the lake that my friend had said that's where they found them. Well, we ended up finding better prints on the other side of the lake as we're walking out. In fact, one was a knuckle print and hand print where it had gotten down into the dirt, and there were several of them. So never run out of cast material until you're done with the whole thing. You find and you do more investigation. But the hill to toe stride on the subject was 30 inches, which is an average. That's my height average. And but it wasn't until we found where the subject had come in from the deep timber. And if you know the area, there's nobody's going to run around in that area. And plus, some people, and there it really is. It looks like a mid-tarsal break is in the. But that was pretty cool. Another thing, a more recent story is we had family and friends that went up to an area in the Uintas. It's private land. But my youngest son, as we were out, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. About 1 o'clock in the morning, we had been seeing a lot of elk and deer and different things, so we had a really good frame of reference, which was really nice. But he ended up seeing one through a thermal imager that night. So if you want to hear his story, you can hunt him down. He's right there. What I do now is we just go out and family with friends. We usually do about 3 or 4 trips a year and do this stuff. And we have a lot of fun doing it. Most of all, people have asked me, why I do it, and I really don't care if people know that I do it. But one of the sidebar things has come from this journey is I have become extremely close to my children. You get really close to children and your family when you're out there at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning doing this, and you have a lot of time to talk. And now we also have tons of stories. Because until they find an actual subject, the pictures you see and those different things are mostly for the people because they really don't prove a whole lot of evidence. But there is more circumstantial evidence concerning Squatch than most people go to death row for. There is a lot of information out there, and Jeff Meldrum, for those who may not know the subject, he's a professor out of Idaho State University. He's probably the premier person on Squatch in the footprint. And he's said some interesting things. One is their foot is actually designed not to leave prints. Because I have found several times that I know we've had activity inside our camp, and I have only found drag marks because they go from all fours to walking. It's nothing to them because there was 4 individuals in Sierra Nevadas that they all had cameras, and I'm guilty of this too, that I've been in situations where if I would have thought about it, but they all had cameras and they saw a subject run across the scree slope, and the subject was going from 2 to 4 like it was nothing. And it really didn't change in the clip and the speed. I know a guy from Louisiana, the Washington expedition, he thought he was watching a wolf come up or a coyote come up with a thermal until it stood behind the tree and looked around the tree at him. Another interesting thing is, I was like when I first got into this, I was really naive about the topic, and I'm still not an expert. But what was kind of shocked me was all the photographs that I saw on the Washington expedition. That they had so many photographs. In fact, 2 people on that expedition ended up getting photographs. One of the photographs was 226 yards away, and we had my 5'10" friend go out there, and we estimate that it was probably it was at least another half of him high. Oh, and by the way, the one in California is 86 yards away, because we take laser rangefinders and things like that. It was 86 yards away. And one of the things we do a lot in a particular area is we do a lot of test things to kind of get an idea. And this is one of the things that the trackers taught us to do. They said one of the things, when you think you hear something in the mountains, more than likely it's about twice as close. And so what we'll do is we'll go to areas and we'll break sticks and things like that, because that's one of the common occurrences. We'll break sticks to see at a certain distance when you start hearing them. And so when I was down in California where that subject had gone back between the 2 mountains, it wasn't until I got to a 2.5-inch diameter stick before they heard me. And they were hearing stick breaks down there. So it kind of gives you an idea of sometimes when you think you hear a stick break in the mountains, that it's probably a lot larger stick. It's not just something being stepped on. Another thing too is 4-legged animals like ungulates and stuff like that. Their fur is actually designed really well not to break sticks and to sneak through the forest, because probably the dumb ones that make noise probably get eaten by predators. And so they're really designed not to do that. So when they do things like that, when they break sticks, we found it's deliberate. There's actually one situation where I actually think I found a stick that was broken. A friend of mine who's a squatcher, he was up in Farmington, above, I don't know if you guys know the lagoon, but Farmington Canyon is known for a lot of activity, and they've actually snuck down into the dumpsters by Lagoon and ate the dumpsters. Well, there's a lot of people who have seen him doing that. But anyway, this was up on top of Farmington. He was sleeping. It was a opening day of muzzleloader, and he heard some noise come into camp. And one of the things he heard was a stick break, and he was very precise on where he had heard things from. So he took me up there about 3 or 4 days later. He showed me the loaf of bread that the subject had stolen. I actually still have the plastic that it had bitten into and ripped it out. You can see the incisor on the plastic, and it had taken the bread out and ate half the loaf. But he said the stick break came from a certain spot, and I actually found a fresh break of a tree about that big around, and I took it. And it's one of the few things that I think probably was actually done by a squatch. My last story before we go to Q&A, a few years ago, behind Ben Lomond Peak, there was an individual that contacted us and had an encounter behind Ben Lomond Peak. And I can't remember if it's North Fork campground area. Anyway, so he was with his children and a friend, and he took one of his children to the restroom, and all of a sudden he heard commotion from his other children, and he had left back in camp. He came back in camp, and there was a subject, excuse me, that was just outside, just beyond the picnic table where his 2 kids were. And the way he was talking and describing everything, I said, he's either a first responder, or he's former military, or he is currently military, because the way he was doing things, and he said he drew his pistol, had a tack line on it, and he put it right on the subject's forehead, and the subject just kind of casually walked away, and he showed us where it walked away. And but so his kids were so freaked out, he just packed up everything and just left. Well, the following morning he goes back to get his camp. Well, let me rephrase that. He didn't pack up everything; they just left, because the following morning he went back to get the rest of his gear, and he hears commotion in a nearby pond. He's going, who on earth is swimming and doing things this early in the morning? Because the sun hadn't even come up. And so he goes back there, and as you're going, there's a berm that you have to go up before you can see into the pond area. Well, as he's going down this berm, this dip before he goes up to the berm, he has a lot of splash and a lot of commotion. And then he gets up there, and he sees one. We ended up guessing it was about 56 to 60 yards away, and he was standing there. He says it was just a massive individual covered with hair, standing there just staring at him. And all of a sudden it just turns around, jumps up onto the ledge, which we ended up measuring was 8 feet. So he was submerged in water up to his waist. He jumped 8 feet of bank, up on the bank, and just left, casually walked off. So my friend and I, we went around. My friend was going to check the pond region, and I was going to go up where he believed the subject went. So I went and started doing a spiral search up there, and this was 30 days after the sighting, and in that particular, not like now, we had tons of rain. So there was a lot of rain. So I didn't really expect to find a whole lot of anything. So we went up there, and actually was asking the individual questions about his background, but he was being really tight-lipped. And so I kind of guessed on where I thought the subject had left. But anyway, long story short, as I found his track line up the mountainside, it was about a 5 to 6 foot track line, and his toes, his imprints of his toes were about 7 inches across. And it went up the track line, and then that's when he finally opened up to me, and told me what he did. But he was a JTAC, and he knew his stuff, and he was very precise on his descriptions, knew his details, and knew everything. And that's when he finally opened up to me, because he wasn't sure how legit we were until I found the track line. Unfortunately, I couldn't cast them because of how old they were, and the toes were dug into the mountainside, but it's when I started showing them they went up through this area. And a lot of times when they go through areas, as a human, you're going, I wouldn't do that, but they don't care. From what I found, they'll go wherever they want. And that's usually when you find them, is they'll go in the crap that you hate. Anyway, is that long enough? You want me to go longer? Let's do a few Q&As, and that might spark some more stories. But they want me to open up for Q&A, so does anybody have any questions? What's that? So mid-tarsal break, if you get Jeff Melvin's book, so let me put this paper away so I'm not following with it. Your foot can't bend, so if my foot is flat on the ground like this, your foot can't bend like this, like a hand can. Theirs can. So what they'll do is when they're walking, one of the things they do is they don't have a toe kick off like you do, and they don't have a heel hit like you do. They'll hit flat and lift flat. But what mid allows them to do is it allows them to clamp things and grab things like this. In fact, a perfect example is on the 2007 expedition, because there's been a lot of sightings of them in trees and things like that. In the 2007 expedition, a group of people with thermals were in a gorge, and they were walking with thermals, and they heard something that sounded like it was parallel on them. Well, they were new. They were paid customers on this particular expedition, and they pivoted, and they saw a subject that was probably not even 30 feet, 40 feet on the side. What the subject did, it dropped down like a crouch behind the tree and jumped and scurried up the tree. They said it reminded them of something that went after coconuts. The feet clamped around the bottom of the base of the tree like your hands would, and its top of its hands went up, and it went right up in the tree into a really congested area of the pine tree, and they didn't see it, but it freaked them out so bad that as soon as my friend got down there, one of the investigators, he wasn't an investigator at the time, but as soon as my friend got down there and started questioning, he says, "Did you guys keep an eye on it?" So what they think happened is, after they freaked out and lost contact with it, it dropped down and left. But so the mid-tarsal break just allowed your foot to bend like this. And so on the tracks I cast, you can see where the toes, and because it was muddy, you can see where the subject clamped the mud with its foot. And you can't do that, because when you hit like this, and then when you push off, so a really good way to do it is if you just kind of see like a sand area, just walk casually across it, and you'll see, if you're just doing it normally, your heel will hit and your toe will push sand. So you'll have a toe push up. But if you get Jeff Mulder's book or just go online, there's plenty of pictures, but it hits like this and lifts. That's why you don't really see heel hits and toe kickoffs unless they're trying to clamp their foot for traction. That's what mid-tarsal break is.
Where's that lake and how you in it?
I was told not to reveal. Sorry. If you search, I'll give you a hint. If you search hard enough, the individual who found the tracks, who told me not to say anything, he did say something. So I'll blame it on him if you find him. He's not here, but if you happen to find that place, it's sure. So YouTube, maybe Instagram. Yeah, maybe Instagram. There are things I have promised I won't tell, and that's one of them. Even though later on, after he promised me not to tell, I see where he tells like what. But I'm not going to break my promise. But it doesn't take a whole lot. But it's an area where it has a long history. It goes back to the 70s of having encounters where one laid on a tent with a bunch of kids. In fact, one of the kids ended up falling asleep because he couldn't get out from underneath one. Where there's seasoned hikers who've gone back to this place that hike Washington State, Oregon, Alaska, and they won't go back there. And one of them found a deer leg on their doorstep of their tent when they were back there. There's all kinds of interesting activities that have happened back there, but it's gone clear back to the 70s. This area has a long history of activity. Yeah, you, yep. Yep. So his question is, for those who didn't hear, is where are the pictures and stuff? And that was one of my questions too. So I'll go into a couple topics. One is what I learned on the Washington expedition, where actually 2 individuals got pictures that day. They don't share them. It's almost like, well, there's a couple reasons. It's become more pop culture now because of Finding Bigfoot and other shows out there. So more people about it, but back then they wouldn't. And in all reality, it's a really good topic or it's a really good story for that person, because we call them blob squatches. It's just a blob. Unless you're there and you can actually do the physical investigation or actually find the track line, which we did on the one that was 226 yards away. We found where it went into the woods. It was an old logging. It came out with one step in the middle of the road. When they were talking to me, also who was talking to me, I thought, nah, no, I can go bushwhacking. Well, my first bushwhacking trip up there, I sunk my hip in Duff. I thought, no, I'm going to bust a hip. I ain't doing this. So I stayed on roads and things like that. But so that's one thing. So I don't know. I haven't looked into the technology of trail cams lately, but I know trail cams are getting more advanced. But back when I was doing it, they had to get Reconyx trail cams, and they had to send them back to the factory to improve their wake up time and their picture time to be really fast. Because what happens, because of the stride of the Squatch, by the time a Squatch walks in front of your trail cam, and your trail cam wakes up and triggers, it's long gone. There's a lot of intent. I actually saw pictures of one carrying a snake, one peeking around a tree with its face. I saw a lot of pictures, and I asked that very question. I said, why aren't they showing this? Because it was a book that you could just flip through. They didn't want to. There's a lot of people that just don't want to do it. They don't want to share it. They want to keep it within the group. It also depends on the group, but you would think with all the trail cams and different things that are out there, you get more definitive pictures and things like the Patterson film. And when you do, one of the things that I like to do is I want to find the physical evidence to corroborate the picture, because there's so much technology now. I mean, they've done a lot of investigation on the Patterson film to where the suits, they have Hollywood people, the suit technology didn't exist back then. Biomechanically, they can't replicate the stride. And what a lot of people don't know is they actually took a tracker up after that film and tracked Patty up the mountainside, and Patty actually sat on her butt about 150 yards off and watched Gimlin and Patterson look at that. Another thing they don't know about, a lot of people don't know about that footage, is they actually found Patty's footprints years and years before, and they found her track line, but after she witnessed them look at her tracks, they never found her prints again. But so yeah, there's just a lot of people don't share, and I'll be honest with you, if I ever find or have a picture, you probably will never see it. Well, here's the reason why, is because I used to be of the mindset that I wanted to prove it to the world, and now I thoroughly enjoy doing it with family and friends. and the stories. And actually, I really love taking skeptics up. The skeptics do a few things for you. One is they're skeptical, so they'll question everything you're doing. At least I hope they do, and we want them to. We want to. If you don't believe something, tell me, because it's kind of a refresher course, because you get so ingrained and indoctrinated into it that you get jaded. I mean, there's times I'll go up, I don't set my trail cam up. I'm trying to be better because my wife goes, "Why are you buying this stuff if you're not using it?" So I try to be better about it, because you just kind of get jaded. And so, but a lot of people just don't want to share things. And so I just do it for mostly family, friends, and things like that now. But skeptics are good, and plus I like to see people wrap their head around things when stuff happens. And I don't try to convince people. I want them to go through the process. There was one person in our group that actually took him a year before he admitted to himself that he saw one. And he's actually seen him twice. In fact, one of the times was on the other side of the truck that I was standing on, but I couldn't bring myself. You think you're going to act a certain way when certain things happen? No. You want me to tell the whole story? My kids make fun of me. So he's young. I don't remember how old he was. Ethan, he was 11 years old. I was probably a bad parent, took my kids out when they were young. But my friend, one of the guys had just seen one up in this area. It's up by Logan. So we go up there, and for whatever reason, whenever we saw eye shine on this particular subject, we could only see one eye, so we don't know if something happened to his other eye. So anyway, Ethan's in the truck in my Ford F-150. He's in the passenger side, and I think it was 3 people. It was Christine, Steven, and I can't remember the third person. It was you? Oh, punk. We were going to go up and do some howling while I was with Ethan, because Ethan didn't want to go. So they were going to do some call blasting, and we were going to call blast and vocal back and forth. And so they leave, and I go to walk around the other side, the back end of my truck to get on the other side and get in the vehicle with Ethan until they got to their spot. Well, I go back around the back side of the truck, and something bounces to my feet. No, that's not supposed to happen. And so I go back, grab the walkie-talkie, and I go, you guys turn back and look, because they had my first gen night vision. I said, you guys need to turn back and look over here. I think something's over here. Well, our friend Christina, I'm going to out her. My friend Christina gets on the radio and starts freaking out on the radio, saying, it's moving in the front of your truck, it's moving to the back of your truck. And I'm thinking, is there a cat? I'm going, am I going to be attacked? Because she's just freaking out, and she's getting me worked up. Because I'm looking on the ground now, trying to see if there's a cat or something that's going to come around the truck and get me. And so I'm doing that, and she says, no, it's moving back and forth. No, it's on the other side of your truck. I'm going, what the crap's going on? And so Steven, her boyfriend at the time, grabs it. He's calmer. He says, it's on the other side of your truck. And I thought, okay, I'm not looking up. And I couldn't bring myself to look up, and I thought, yeah, I'll never crack into that. Yeah, I couldn't bring myself to look over the truck. But the reason why we know it was a Squatch is because this is what they tease me about. I'm on the walkie-talkie. I said, you guys need to get back here. I said, you guys need to come back, because I'm by myself. I'm with 11 years. He can protect me. And I'm going, please. And I start going, please come back. Please come back. And it's all recorded. I had an audio recorder right here. It's all recorded. But I'm going, please come back. So every once in a while, when we're out squatching, you hear on the radio, please come back. Yeah, so I'm fine. They can make fun of me all you want. So they did that. But what happened at the very end is it finally dawned on Steven that he had my first gen night vision. So he brought it up to look, and he actually saw the Bigfoot walk off on the other side of my truck, and I went down and disappeared in the trees. That's how we verified it. Because I was parked on gravel, and the trackers taught us there's 2 things that are the worst things to ever try to track in. One's gravel, and one's pine needles. Those are the 2 worst things to track in, because it's just hard to find sign and transfer. Any questions? I get that a lot. So in the community, no, it's a good question. Okay, he asked me, what do I think Bigfoot is? In the community I was in, because I was when I was with the BFRO, we had chat rooms. And so anything that would happen across the country, we were always chatting about. Because people would ask me too, well, aren't you afraid you're going to get hurt? I said, if anybody across the country ever got hurt, I'd probably be one of the first people to know about it. The prevailing belief amongst that community and is a lost primate or an unknown primate like Gigantopithecus, something like that. Me personally, I don't know. I've had a lot of things. I've had a lot of things occur. I know that I believe they're intelligent. I believe they can communicate because of Scott Nelson, because he's broke down their language in phonics, and he's made. I think it's Scott Nelson. Is it Scott Nelson? Yeah, he was a cryptolinguist for over 20 years for the Navy. You could actually Google his name and find it and see his speeches and things. But he was a cryptolinguist for over 20 years, and he took the Sierra sounds and broke them down. Actually, says they talk twice as fast as we do, but they definitely have a language, and the defining factor of why they have a language is they speak in negation. In other words, they speak in negative connotation. They speak in no, and he believes their word for no is no. And so, but me personally, I haven't come to a definitive conclusion. But the prevailing thing is they think it's a monkey. Okay. The question was, is the Orem Mountains, that's over by Kennecott, right? Yeah, I've hunted over there. And your answer is yes. They have had activity over there, and pretty much they have a lot of the places where they actually have some habituation sites and different things like that are actually more rural than you think. Like there's been in Layton, they've come down. There's places in Oklahoma where they come down in subdivisions and things like that, especially if you're out. But yeah, they have activity pretty much anywhere. I haven't heard of a lot of activity in southern Utah. There's pockets, but pretty much northern Utah, Uintas, Wasatch Front, Orem Mountains, yes, they have activity out there. There's sightings out there. So what he said is their feet are designed not to leave tracks. So, they can do that mid-tarsal break, but if you go look at his book, I think it's something Sasquatch, but he also has stuff online, but their print actually comes down flat and leaves like that. Most of the tracks I have found, like so far, well, one thing, I have a lot of mistakes that I've done, but the tracks that we found, what we'll do is, for one, around this lake, it was in mud, so they couldn't, their weight, because when they trained us, they said an adult male, they don't really start barrel chesting until they're really older. That's the belief. But they range anywhere from 600 to 1,200 pounds. And so when they step in mud and things like that, they really can't hide their prints. My personal experience is I have found, I'm trying to find that really dumb one that leaves stuff, because there's got to be something that existed. But my personal experience where I have actually found that they tend to leave more sign is when they're not near humans, when they become more casual. Because we've had them come into camp several times. We've had a lot of indicators and things like that to where that occurs. No, am I good?
Yeah.
All right, I'm done.
Appreciate you and your family. We're going to have to get you here for some more, I can tell already. It's good stories. By the way, whether they agree with it or not, a lot of BSing after these things. That's some of the funnest times. So remember their faces, and if you've got questions on that, go talk to them. Any of these speakers, we could go a day or two with Q&A and that kind of thing. So hate to shut you down, John, but we got to move on. So, but sure appreciate you. Some good stories. I'm going to tell you something real briefly. Then we're going to have a 10-minute break for everybody to go to the bathroom and go up and buy yourself $1,000 worth of food or something to support everybody, and then we'll start with Patsy's talk. I went on an LDS mission to Alaska, British Columbia, and I was Yukon, and I've lived in Alaska, and so I've been in Alaska all the way down the west coast, and that the Indian people have told me along there that Bigfoot originated in the Henry Mountains in Utah. They'll tell you that up in Canada, the Indian tribes, and that the Indians used to eat them. They used to not be afraid of you, and that's why they'd eat them, because they were so easy to hunt. You could walk right up to them. When they became almost extinct, and like any animal or creature that becomes almost extinct, they get very elusive and hard to see and skittish and that, and try to stay away from everybody. But the Indians historically used to eat them, and they came from the Henry Mountains in Utah and spread all over the place. But that's one of many stories that I know about Bigfoot. But let's take a 10-minute break. So at 7:50. At 7:50, we'll reconvene here with Patsy, and she's going to be talking about Spanish treasure and different things. She's been on recoveries with the Indian tribes and different things. You won't want to miss this. These are great. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Oh, you filming? Okay.
Should have put my thermals on, but I would have cooked when I first got here.
We have some of our classes that we had. We laid tracks that were.
Does that record us if we're talking?
Yeah.
While we're sitting down here?
Yeah? You didn't cuss him out, did you? Because if you did, if you cussed him out, man, I got it on tape, man. You got proof she cussed you out.
Yeah. Spirit is next. No, it only goofed up one time. After that Terry. This way, and probably another 50 this way. Disappearing into the sky. It was really,
Because if you notice,
Yeah. I got. Not seeing it. How'd it do? I don't know. It kept on going on and off. And so, no, it was just the band. I think. So. Jen, I'm not finding it.
What's the name of the gentleman that you want me to meet about those petroglyphs?
Kent Smith? He's the one that's been,
Huh?
he's the one that's been talking.
Oh,
We're showing right now.
That's him. Okay, I'll go over and talk to him.
I forgot you said that. You asked me.
Okay, so that's him. Okay.
Yeah, he might be able to tell you.
I'll go up there and see if I can talk to him.
Thank
Daryl,
you.
how you doing? Oh, remember me?
Tracy Gardner. Tracy. Oh my goodness. Are you going to share your story? The open mic?
You got plenty better than mine.
I'm losing. I might have to, if I start stammering, I'll call you out.
Which one?
The King Balloon mushroom story. Oh, Brett. But you're going to go up, you're going to come to open mic. I'm so glad you came up to me. I wouldn't have recognized you.
You're not speaking tonight? Tomorrow?
Tomorrow night.
Hey, Terry.
Hey.
How you doing? Tracy.
Oh, Tracy, how you doing? Yeah,
You been up there?
I have.
Did you see?
I went up to your house 2 or 3 times. You're up to your trailer. Where are you living?
I'm downtown now.
Problem when you went to the control booth, they opened all the doors, watched all the cameras, didn't have a picture.
After being married?
I'm out of here. Why? Hey, no piss.
Going
It's not
on.
very
Yep. You gotta get some money rounded up and get a trailer. So my brother's got a mill. Start hauling logs.
Really? My accent, my mouth always dry. I've always got to be sipping on something for my mouth to dry. So, more goes in, more's got to come out. Yeah, but I used to pick on my sister since my accent. Me now. Like, oh shit, we drove 30 miles. We're going to find a rest area. Like, how do you drink 10 gallons of water when you've been here? Really? I think sometimes the pure force of the disease, and my dad died from cancer. I had to scare him. I said, you know what? I either beat it or I didn't. Went back in the test room. He says, oh, we can't find it. This is good. Tom's everything. I worked with hospitals. I didn't care. Coffee straight and black. You ever drink it iced? I guess I'm gonna ask. Down like a French press. You just put, you know, coffee. You put it in there and you let it sit for 24 hours in the fridge. Press it down, dump it in the cup, drink it cold. It's not, it doesn't have the bitter taste. I like it better. It's the only other coffee I can drink it. Well, if I say I drink it, the word drink or my buddy Tyler Coaster, he took a cup of coffee and poured it. We were always fighting each other. It's like, this is graveyard. We all drink 2 cups of coffee at the beginning of the shift. One push to drink coffee. Got 5 years.
big black falcon sitting back there. Working away, same old routine, swinging nails.
Pay the bill.
It's damn windy, I have a hard time hearing.
I know. I saw you back there, and I'm like, who's that? Looks like. No, I've heard your name a million times. I don't know. Everybody. It's all good stuff.
Her husband hang out with Dan and all the crazies. You know, we go out and you know Dan does.
Exactly.
We had Soapstone a few years ago.
Yeah. Like
1, Okay, let's get started here. We got lots of things to talk about, so okay, our next speaker is going to be Patsy Sursa, and she's going to talk about Spanish treasure and occupancy in the area and different treasure stories and that. Real interested to talk to. Before we get started with her, just a couple of things. David Jukes, where are you, David? Everybody see him over here? Okay, he does commercial signage and stickers and all kinds of things. I think he's selling stuff over there, and he's been great. He's helped us make quite a few things for this event. There's one of his plaques right there, and we're going to give away one of those tonight and one tomorrow night to people. We've had several suggestions as we're trying to figure out how we're going to determine who to give this to, and I decided, since I'm the master of ceremonies tonight, that I get to decide how we're going to do it, and we're going to give it to the best speaker tonight, and I've already determined that was me. So none of the other people liked that idea very good. I was the only one. I don't know why, but so anyway, we've had a few suggestions, and what we came up with here is the first person to come up with, from this point forward, with a $50 donation gets this plaque. It's made out of aluminum, absolutely gorgeous. But David over there does this kind of work. We're giving him a plug. Anybody that needs any kind of advertising, that needs to go over and talk to him. But $50 donation, somebody, we've got one right here, it looks like. So there goes our plaque for tonight. I have no idea what Mark's going to do to give his away tomorrow night. He's going to be the master of ceremonies, and but we'll give this one away. And then David, I think that you had some other presentations that you want to do. So after you get through there, if you want to come up, I heard you want to do it while it's still light. And we're working on a couple of problems. We've got issues. So if you want to come up right now, we'll let you do your presentations right now.
There's my first $50 donation and another 50 on top of it for it.
You want the plaque?
Take a class.
I think he's already got it, but otherwise we'll give it to you.
Did you get it?
Your money, we're gonna do another one tomorrow, mate, too.
Yeah, we're getting, if you want to do that.
We might have to sit up here.
Yeah, that's what Yeah. John, come on up here. Terry, where are you, Terry? Come on up here, Terry. I thought that was mine. That's why I called you up here. Okay, and Patsy. And Greg. Greg, where are you? Greg Gardner. Oh, he might be over to his thing. Oh, by the way, I need to tell you that Greg Gardner is over in that white building way over there, and he's far enough away that nobody knows where he's at. He needs a lot of business over there, selling his T-shirts and mugs and all that kind of stuff. So make sure you get to Greg Gardner's. If you're just going out here for food vendors and that, you need to wrap around on the other side of the slippery slides and everything to that building over there, and that's where Greg Gardner's selling a bunch of stuff. But I'm going to turn this over then and for the presentation. Did we get everybody here? Oh, and John. John, can we get you here for a minute? You got one for...
He thinks you're talking to him.
Oh, is he tomorrow or today?
He's tomorrow.
He's tomorrow. I got some for tomorrow.
We'll get you tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
All right, I'm David Jukes. I've been following this type of thing for a lot of years. Been following Terry Carter's videos since he was first day on YouTube. I made these little plaques in appreciation for all these guys and what these guys do. So I've got here's one for Terry, his kind of logo thing.
Man, that's awesome, David. I met David a long time ago. He's kind of a man up to Rock Creek, man. He's a Spanish treasure hunter from this area, man. Man, that's awesome, David. Thank you.
Okay, then I made one for each one of the
That
guests.
is cool.
The guest speakers. So I've got a gold or a silver, a gold and a copper for the precious metals. So I guess you guys can fight it out what color you want. So you can choose which.
Well, I would be the third place.
You want third place?
Yeah.
You're not first
You
place?
better take the gold, Patsy. You're the gold.
You got a gold or
You're
a
the gold
silver?
Spanish treasure hunter. You better take the gold.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hey,
All right.
David, that's awesome. Thank you.
Very much. Awesome. Thank
All
you.
right.
Yeah. It does. You like me.
All right, we're having some difficulty with the projector and that, and our next two speakers both have, I think, have some photos and stuff. So we're trying to figure out what we're going to do here. But Patsy, are you ready to go, or do you need to?
Yeah, I can start off.
Do you need me to stall? You're okay? Okay, so this is Patsy Sursa. I hope I pronounced that right, didn't I? She says it's great. She didn't tell me it was right, but it's great. So we're going to turn it over to Patsy. By the way, Mark and I and some of the other people we work with to put these together have learned over the 20 plus years we've been putting these on that we go out and interview now to make sure that we're getting the cream of the crop, people that have great stories, and that at least we believe them in that, or we wouldn't have them in that. And we came out and months ago and interviewed Patsy and had her for about 2 hours, I think, tell us some stories and that, and I could listen to her all day long. She's a wonderful person. Let's turn it over and give a big hand to Patsy Sursa.
Hi, everybody. Do we need the mic down? You can't hear me?
Do you want those down?
Well, that's good. Yes.
Tilt this one. Is that better?
Okay. I see so many people here that I know from home. I know that when Kent was talking, and he was talking about the Kirshenab, this is a good book on the Kirshenab, but there's so many stories about Rock Creek and the whole Uinta Basin. My place, I enjoyed Rock Creek better than any of them because I lived so close to it for so many years. But and I've changed my mind on what to say here so many times. So I'm going to read a lot of what I wrote. So anyway, Thomas Rhodes come over to Utah about a year before the Mormon pioneers did. And he went on to California, and he started working at Sutter's Mill, and he was gold mining. And then when Brigham Young came, and he decided Salt Lake was going to be the place that the pioneers were going to settle, he called Thomas Rhodes to come back. And by then, Thomas had gotten quite a bit of gold. And I know a lot of people say, oh, he come back with tons of gold. Well, he didn't, because a wagon can't carry tons of gold. But he came back with $17,000 worth of gold. And he donated 10,000 of that back to the Mormon church because they was trying to get their city going, and the Mormon mints and the gold. And that was around 1850.
If it ain't broke, Kent. Don't fix it.
Awkward.
You're fired.
Nobody gets away for free now.
Not working. You hear that? No. I heard you hear the mic.
Give us that mom voice. Come on.
Testy, testy, 1, 2, 3, testy, man, let's go, let's go.
Anyway, the gold that they came back with, I figured it was about 70 pounds of gold, because gold at that time was running at about $20 an ounce. And that would bring about $17,000. So he didn't come back with tons of gold, but it did help. But anyway, Chief Wakara, he converted to the Mormon church. And he really had, oh my goodness, okay. The Chief Walker converted to Mormonism, and he really appreciated Brigham Young. They became really good friends, and he was trying to help him get the city running, get the mint going and everything. So he offered to let them to take him to the Kirchenab, the sacred mine. There's actually two sacred mines, but the Kirchenab is one, and I think that one's over by White Rocks, and the other one I think is between Rock Creek and Moon Lake, where somewhere in there. But he gave him the rules. He said that he would take one person, and they would have they would take them. Let me find this spot. Okay. The location of the gold can only be revealed to one man, and that had to be trusted by Brigham Young and the Indians. And he was to have.
Oh, you did it now. Kid, quit messing with it.
They're just messing with you, Patsy. Time out. Commercial break. This is a commercial break. I'm just the check guy. Check.
Oh, you almost had it. Got a loose connection there. Right there.
Check.
Okay, you got it, Terry.
Now leave it alone.
Check.
Look, there's the wire on this street.
Check.
All right, leave it alone, kid.
Okay, don't touch it.
Don't touch it.
Okay, commercial break's over.
Check. Check.
All right, yeah, but it shouldn't go mute on me, should it? Okay. Testing, it works.
It works. Leave it alone. Leave it alone.
Okay, hit it.
Okay, number one, the guy had to be trusted by Brigham Young and the Ute tribe, and he was to have a guide provided by the Ute Indians. And the only one who would know where this location was would be the guy that they chose. There would be a penalty of death if the person received the gold and gave up the location or brought out the gold without permission of the Utes. He could only bring as much as he could pack for the use of the church and would receive no help from the Utes. The Kirchenab is a sacred mine, meaning where the Great Spirit dwells. Chief Wakara's name meant keeper of the yellow metal. And Kerry Boren, in his book, gave a great account of what he saw. He claims that he went into the Kirchenab and he seen it, and it's Aztec treasure. And if this is one of the true stories, it's quite amazing. It says the fabulous lode of the Orem Mountains, which makes it indisputably the richest source of gold in the world, Caleb Rhodes claimed there was enough gold in the sacred mine alone to pave the streets of New York City, with enough left over to pay off the national debt. Apparently it derives from these chambers of lava tubes having been filled wall to wall with molten gold. This then was the old ones, the Aztecs of the predecessors, the mines in the caverns. As they mined out each room, they left the walls plated with molten gold, and in its soft, precious surface carved their strange hieroglyphics and made it a sacred temple. This is his account of going into it. There you go. He entered from the secondary tunnel. The main entrance is contrived to prevent intruders. First encounters of precipice dropping abruptly to the bottom of the great chamber of sufficient size to accommodate 3 or 4 story house. At the bottom, embracing the north wall of the chamber, a stream of icy water courses until it drops away to a subterranean tube. The floor of the chamber slopes upward, ending in the south wall. In this chamber, there are skeletons. Now, the sacred mine, the Kirchenab. So when I talked to Kerry about this, he sent me this, and this is not written in any books. And whether you believe Kerry Bourne or not, it's quite a fascinating story. But he says, I've been asked many times to tell the story of how I was able to view the sacred mine after decades of searching. It was not an easy story to tell. To begin with, I swore an oath to the Ute tribe never to reveal its location, nor to speak of details which might lead intruders to the mine. Over the years, I have published nearly a half a dozen books about the history of the Lost Roads mine and revealed some details about the sacred mine. In recent years, the Utes have asked me to stop publishing books and articles about the mines because the reservation lands have been deluged with treasure hunters, fences, digging holes, and violating the sanctity of religious sites. I have kept that promise. This is the first occasion I have ventured to explain the circumstances which allowed me to view the sacred mine. I have no concerns that anything I say here will lead anyone to the sacred mine. You could stand on top of it and never suspect its presence. This account is not intended to offer clues to treasure hunters. It is merely an explanation of my involvement with the sacred mine and the circumstances of my singular honor to view its contents. I have written the contents of the sacred mine in my book, The Gully of the Kershinab. Of course, I have detractors who, though mostly praising the book as an important addition to the history of the mines, are critical of the last chapter, and they visit the sacred mine. I don't blame the scoffers completely. After all, who could believe after several hundred years of vigorous searching with no success, someone should actually be shown the sacred mine and its contents? I am used to the critics, and for the most part, I ignore their negative comments, but I feel it's time to explain just a little further how it came about. After many years of in-depth research, I located the journals of my third great-grandfather, Isaac Morley. Father Morley, as he was familiarly known as, was an intimate friend of Chief Walker of the Utes. In fact, Father Morley baptized Chief Walker into the LDS Church. The journals contained accounts of Father Morley's early conversation to the church and his many offices and adventures connected with it. But more than this, they contain important information about the location of the sacred mine. I was excited by the discovery and planned to incorporate the information together with the maps in my next book. It became common knowledge that I was intending to publish this information, and one day I received a message from my uncle, Billy Reed, a member of the Ute tribe, asking me to come and see him before I published any information on the mine. William Charles Reed was born February 17, 1897 in White Rocks, Utah. He was the son of James B. Kenneth Reed and Rachel Christine Murray. He married my Aunt Burley Boren. I'm not going to go through the dates. So my father was raised on the reservation. I remember when I was about 16 or 17, my father brought me over to the mountain from our home near Manila, Utah, to White Rocks on the reservation to visit my Aunt Burley's family. They met. What? Ooh. They met us at the home of Uncle Bill Reed's aunt, Mary Reed Harris, in White Rocks. That was my first introduction to Mary Reed Harris. At one point during our visit, she took me by the hand, beckoned me to follow her outside, where she wanted to show me something. She pointed up at the Hayuena Mountains north of her home and said, "Look high up there. That is where the sacred mine is. You can see it from my home." I look at it every day while white men run around the reservation looking for it. She sort of cackled a little at that thought. It was my first hint about the sacred mine, and it nurtured me a lifelong quest to find it and know its history. In time, I met with 5 elders of the Ute tribe who questioned me at length about the mines, how much I knew about them and what my intentions were about publishing the information I had about the sacred mine. They wanted to know if they allowed me to see the sacred mine, I would never publish the early journals, and I would never reveal the mine's location to anyone, even to my family. I didn't think this was that long, sorry. One of the elders, Wabin Wansa, which a lot of people here know about Wabin, was born in 1902 and died in 1980. He's adamantly opposed to the proposal and said no white man could ever be trusted with such temptation. Unfortunately, except to say that after that unforgettable trip to the mine, I would never be the same. I had seen things that were more valuable to me than all the gold in the mine. And afterwards, Wash and I became fast friends. He took me to another place relating to early Ute history and told me stories of the Ute people and their relations with the Spaniards and the whites who invaded their country, altered the course of their history. He told me stories I can never repeat. My final message in connection to the sacred mine is this: leave it where it lies. It does not belong to you. It belongs to the Ute people as their cherished heritage. Respect their wishes and keep off the Ute lands. Avoid the curse that plagues the lives of when about 1992, a friend of mine, Bill Blazard, a lot of you guys here from the basin probably know who he is. He was my best prospecting partner in the world. He passed away in 2002 when he was 86, and the year he passed away, he was still up here hiking in these mountains. And you didn't wait on him. He would go anywhere. But he called me that day, and he says that there was him and a few of his friends that had gotten together, and they was up at Yellow Pine Campground, and wanted me to come up and share stories and pictures. And I told him that I would go. I'm good, seriously. There's no wind up here, but thank you. So I went up there, and it was such a great day. We sat there for hours and hours and just told stories, and those guys were just, you get talking to the old timers, and that's where you get your information from. So we got talking about Miners Gulch and the area up there, and Bill told me, he said, when I was about 14, he said, I used to log up in that area, and he said that they always said that there was a smelter up there, but he said, I'd never seen the smelter. And I said, well, I know where it's at because you can practically drive to it. So he said, well, take us. So we all jumped in our trucks, and I had a small S10 pickup, wouldn't fit but 2 people. And one of the guys that was his friend that came with him was from Vancouver, Washington, and a lot of people around here would probably know him. His name was Don Rust. You know Don Rust? No? But Don, he grew up here, Sid Rust. You guys know Sid Rust from Mountain Home? Yeah, because it's his brother. So Don was from Vancouver, Washington, and he asked if he could ride with me over there. And I told him, sure. So we get in, and we go to take off, and he put his hand over on mine, and he just started crying. And he said, I'm dying. And he says, I have cancer, and all the money in the world's not going to save my life. He said, I've known this story since I was 14, and he was 76 at the time. He said, he said when he was young, and I'm going to really try not to say location and name names, but he was shown a place by a tribal member that he said he went into that had 600 ton of gold. Don seen this. And he said the bars in there were dated, I think he said 1667. I should have looked at my notes on that, but I think it was 1667. And he said, so all this money's not going to help me, but he said, if you could help me make a deal with the tribe to where if I give them this information and the location, could they please go in? If they got it, could my family get 10% of it? So I did talk to the tribe, and they did agree, and the council got together, and they agreed and done a contract and everything to where Don's family could get this 10%. And in the meantime, Don was sending me information through fax machines. It was before emails, it was before text and cell phones and all that, but we had fax machines. But everything would come through in black and white. So he says, okay, go to this area and take a picture, send me an 8x10, and I will mark this and this for you. So I did, and of course the picture goes back to him in black and white, and it comes back to me in black and white, and it's really hard to figure out what he marked on there. But he told us, okay, here you're going to find this, and here you're going to find this, and when you get up there. So anyway, we did. We found everything he said. We know that the whole mine was concealed. We knew it was there. And it took us about 3 days to find it. And when we found it, they said, somebody's watching us. We can't go any further. And somebody had been following us, and somebody had been watching us. So anyway, no, it never was recovered. And I know that because it's in a place where you ride by and see if it's been messed with, and I know it hasn't been messed with. But that's been quite a while ago, and Don never had his dream of receiving the treasure. But I have other stories. One of the biggest things about the basin and what they talk about is Treasure Hill. Everybody talks about Treasure Hill and the treasure being on Treasure Hill. No, I'm going to go back to another one really quick first, okay? So years ago, I'm not going to mention his name either. He's not with us anymore, but I still should get permission from his family before I talk about him. He told me that him and his dad was taken to a place in a canyon. He said he was really young at the time. He was like 10 years old. And he says in the canyon, there was a crevice that would come down on an angle about 6 to 8 inches wide. And he said if you put your face right up to it, you could see a mummy back in there. And they said that was the sleeping princess. And see this picture right up here? Okay, that's why I wanted to start with this story. So we went in there, we spent an awful lot of time checking these canyons. Of course, we never found no crevice, and we never found no sleeping princess. But up on a ledge, it came down about maybe 15 foot, and then there was a ledge that you could stand on, and then it went down again another 15 or so feet. But on that ledge was a rock similar to this. This is not the one. We pried the rock off, and there was a big hole in there. So we're thinking, okay, well, if the sleeping princess is in a canyon in one of these crevices, then they had to get her in there somehow. They didn't just squeeze her through the crevice, you know. So we started digging it out, and it filled in with sand probably about 2/3 the way up. And we started pulling sand out and pulling it out and pulling it out, and we dug back in there a long ways, and then it got to where it was just too far. So we went home and got an old red wagon of the kids's and tied a rope to each end, and one would crawl into the hole, fill it, the other one would pull it out and dump the sand. And we done that. We got back in, I'd guess close to 30 feet. And this tunnel just kept going. So the tunnel had been dug. And then it started shifting down. And then it snowed on us, and we had to get out. We couldn't go back till the next year, and in the meantime, I divorced, and I never went back. So anyway, I've never been back to the spot. But people around here know about the Sleeping Princess, the mountain range, and everything. And here's the tribe's version of the Sleeping Princess. And they say she was a real person. It says, the road was rough as we traveled through Red Rock Mountains. At the top of Red Rock, we turned off the main road into even rougher road that led to the Sleeping Lady. As we approached the foot of the mountain, BC, I will use his initials for confidential reasons, told us of the mountain. The year was early 1800s, and I believe around 1850 or so he began. There was a young Indian squaw who was one of the most beautiful ever seen by any man in the Ute tribe, he said. Most men took advantage of this young lady. BC paused for a moment and then continued. My ancestors, whether he was my great or great-great-grandpa, I'm not sure, fell deeply in love. Members killed him. He said the young girl was so heartbroken that she ran away and threw herself off a large cliff. Her young brother found her and put her in a small cave in the mountain. The rest of the tribe came to the grave and gave her a proper burial. He continued the next few years. The mountain took the shape of a young woman. That's where we came in. We came looking for the grave of the dead woman as we parked the truck and got out. We heard a rumbling deep in the ground, but thought nothing of it. We got out and walked around. As we neared the cliff, suddenly the ground rumbled and then shook hard and then harder. Suddenly the cliff caved in and took BC with it. As I ran away, the last I heard were his desperate cries for help. When I finally got home to get help, my family said they neither heard nor felt the rumbling. We went back to find BC, but found no trace of him. In fact, everything looked as though nothing happened. My footprints were still there, the cliff was still there. Everything was as though nothing had happened at all. After I had calmed down, my family told me of the gold that the princess guards, and if anyone gets near it, the mountain will shake as though it is being dynamited under the ground. Makes me think of another story. Most of you from around here know John and Shirley Rayburn. They used to own the Mountain Home Lodge years ago. And when the dam was being built up there in Mountain Home, it was between 83 and 87, I believe. Shirley called me one day and she said, Patsy, don't go to Rock Creek. The BIA and the FBI and the county police and the state police, they're all down there. They found a grave alongside of the road and they're just taking down everybody's license plates. And so as time went on, we found out that there was a hole that was dug and there was a small amount of snow on the ground. And so they seen where there was a fresh dig, and it was guys going to work up at the dam. And when they got out and looked, it looked like a body down in this hole. There was a blanket on it. So then they called it in, and of course that's when it was on tribal grounds. So the tribe comes in, and by the time they investigated the whole thing, it was a bale of straw that somebody had stuck down in there. But it brought the entire police force from one end to the other over to Rock Creek. Well, okay, so there was a businessman over here that probably about 6 months later or so, I was talking to some guys that we was talking about that story about that grave, and that one guy said, "We done that." He said, "We was hired by this businessman to go in there and dig this hole to bring everybody's attention over here, because he hired a 15-year-old kid over here to go into this cave and stole, he paid this kid $3,000 to go in and get a sword out of this cave." So he says that there's a hill shaped as a teepee. Around the back side of the hill is a trail, and there's a hole that goes into the side of this, and you could look back in there and see a skeleton of a man that had a sword over his lap. And he told this kid, "If you'll get that sword for me," he said, "I will give you $3,000. So the kid, you know, he was pretty wise. He took a long PVC pipe and put a hoop on it and crawled in there and hooked onto that sword and brought it out, and he got his money. But the story goes behind this skeleton is 80 bars of gold, and that's what the skeleton's supposed to be guarding. And I don't think anybody dared go back in. Anyway, that's pretty clever to get the entire police force over here. But they never did catch him. I mean, the guy who got the sword is not with us anymore either, so. But anyway, the pictures I wanted to show you, there's stories of it. This was in Gil and Carrie's book in the very beginning. This is how I first got into prospecting. I was in Duchesne one time. I was about 15 years old. We ran into a guy. I won't get into the whole details of this story, but ran into a guy that was reading this book. And we were young, and he was like in his 20s, and he got telling us about treasures. And he said, "Come and go for a ride with us." And I mean, we were stupid teenagers. We jumped in the car with this total stranger. But that's all he wanted to do was go up and show us this. But anyway, it caught my interest. And that's the first picture he showed us. Can you go to the next one? Okay. So these pictures here, all right, they get talking about all the tunnels in the ground and everything, and I believe that's what this is. If you can see the symbols in it, the head of every one of these is a dot, and I think it's showing openings. The shapes of everything, and every one of them's got a different dot on them. But the thing of it is, let's see, the next one is, next one, I don't know why you got some. This is a Knights Templar symbol. Go to the next one. This we can't figure out what it is. It is so confusing that nobody's been able to figure it out. It's not Spanish and it's not Indian. That one is Spanish. Sorry, I take that back. The next one. That's 1491. And Columbus was here in 1492. So, you know, we know that like before Columbus was here, but did you know that Columbus was secretly a Knights Templar, and he was secretly a Jew? When he was in Spain, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, they was expelling all the Jews from Spain if they would not convert to Catholicism to the Catholic Church. And so Columbus was looking for a safe place for him to go. And I think he already knew about the Americas. I mean, you look about North America, it's not an island out in the middle of the ocean. We're connected to Canada, we're connected to South America. You know, it's connected. There was people here long before Columbus was here. But, okay, the next one. Next one. I don't know what that is, but it's pretty interesting. Next one. That one. That's not Spanish. And that's not Indian. They think it's Knights Templar. Everybody, all the experts that I've talked to thinks that's Knights Templar. And it very easily could be. We don't know. I mean, there's a lot of writing there. It's pretty awesome. That. I don't know what that is either. Nobody's been able to figure it out, tell us what it was. I found this about 40 years ago, and I just cannot get it out of my mind. I've tried and tried and tried. And the experts I've talked to said that's baffling. They just don't know where they came from. But we know it was before Columbus. The what? The Eye of Rock. What the? It's not exactly. It's similar. It's similar. But there was Egyptians here. Yeah. had the Egyptian picture. There's carvings of the Egyptians. Terry, do you have them? Where's Terry?
Right here, what?
The Egyptian pictures.
I do have them. I'll insert them in.
All right, you insert those in, yeah, because the Egyptians were here. Yeah. So anyway, that's all I've got. I'm not going to continue to go. No. Let me do one more thing, okay? Because this is really cool. This is really cool. People talk, wow. People talk about Treasure Hill. Everybody wants to go to Treasure Hill and find the treasure. That treasure's not on Treasure Hill. So George Thompson, which is one of my favorite authors, I really, really like this guy. He found a waybill. Okay, so he found a waybill. And this is what it talks about. In 1969, there was some guys that went into this treasure cave, the water trap, and pulled out some bars. But the waybill that explains it, it says, from the monastery and the church buildings, all of which were built for the glory of God, across the river to a round-shaped hill, which is flat on top and covered with grass. At the base of this hill, which faces the setting sun, you will find an opening, and at its end a great chamber, which took many workers more than 2 years to hollow out. At the portal, you must take great care in opening the door, which is a very heavy one. You must examine it very closely, for the dead do not talk. When you have unlatched the door, you will find an image of pure gold, 1 vera in height. And a vera is about 33 inches. With the eyes, which are 2 large emeralds, the image was placed there for the good of mankind. Exercise great care in passing through this tunnel, for a trap is there for those not ordained to enter. The chamber itself is light and well made, and is strengthened by blocks of stone, 3 estados. Now that's, each estado is 2 veras. So, I mean, that would be 18 feet. Great care must be taken on entering this room, for enough poison has been laid about to trouble the unsuspecting. In the center of the chamber is a great pile of cast bars of such great weight that it took much labor to place them there. When the bars are moved, a flat stone will be revealed, under which is another chamber, where there are 140 heaps of gold in a box containing 130,000 pieces of gold and silver. This great treasure represents 15 years of work in the mines by more than 500 Nephites, all directed by the king's most reverent and faithful servants of God. It's talking about this treasure being by the mission. It's talking about it being by the mission and by the school. There's no mission or school up by Treasure Hill. So it's just definitely in the wrong place, is what people have been searching there. I mean, Jim Phillips was in there looking. And he was the one that offered everybody 90% of his 10% that he got, but that's another story. Anyway, that's all I've got. And I'm supposed to ask for questions. Yes, sir. Oh, Mel Fisher. Ron talked about Mel Fisher a lot. Mel Fisher was here. Okay, do you want me to tell you the Mel Fisher and Jim Phillips? Okay. All right. Mel Fisher had come in here. Oh, boy, that's bright. Mel Fisher had come in here, and the story is that he found a map off the Etosha, and it brought him to the Uinta Basin. And he was coming in, they'd come in early in the morning, just before the sun come up, and they was taking the infrared pictures along the ground, which would show hot spots. He came in and he went to the tribe, and he told them, he said, I found these places in there. He brought in gold, laid it before the council, bars, chains. He said, I've got the technology to find this, if you will give me. But Mel Fisher got a little greedy. And he told him that he wanted an 80-20 split, 80 for him and 20 for the tribe, and they just laughed him out of there. They just didn't even want to hear about that. But before they come in to do that, they had all met at a hotel in Salt Lake. Now, Mel told me this. Mel Fisher told me this. He had gone in, and they was showing slides in the hotel room, people that they had invited to come and see the information that they found. And there's a slide that you can put in, like a number 7 yellow something on those slides, and it would show a flash on the hot spot where the gold's buried. And so they had this information, and they had photos of it. And when the meeting got over with, they went out in the parking lot and was getting ready to leave. Jim Phillips asked if he could go back in and use the restroom. And he went in there, and it wasn't until much later, because all the stuff had been put away, that they realized all their information was missing. And the next thing you know, Jim Phillips is out here. He's making a deal with the tribe. And he's saying he knows where this stuff is. And the tribe gave him a 90-day pass to come in, and they gave him a 40-man task force. He was guarded, he was protected, and they just let him do what he wanted to try to find. He never found anything. I mean, later on, he went back and said, tribe speaks with forked tongue, and, you know, he claims that he found this big treasure, but he didn't. I got to go up there with him. I was there at least 2/3 of the time with him, and yeah, nothing was found, but he wasn't an honest person, so. Is that enough? Did you want more? That's good? Okay.
There's the Egyptians behind you.
Oh, no, that's not mine. That's not my picture.
Down here?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. That would be grapes. So anyway, that's what I got. I'll keep it short. Thanks.
Thanks, Patsy. Those are some pretty interesting stories, and I guess we're going to give you another 10 minutes here in just a second break to go to the bathroom, get any more food or whatever, and then we'll have our next presentation. I did want to add just a little bit to what Patsy said. We've been doing this for over 22 years, and our very first powwow was, I was a building official at the time for Morgan County, and Mark, who's my partner on this, has been a contractor for years, and he was building his own home, and and so I reviewed his house plans, and I came up and did all those inspections, and that's how we first got to know each other a little bit. Well, Mark found out that I was really into Spanish stuff and treasures and gold and all this kind of stuff, and he started telling me a story. He says, well, I know this guy who spent a lot of time up in the Uintas looking, and apparently had found different things, and he says, you and he have a lot in common, and he says, so I need to see if I can get you two guys together. And so this went on for a couple of years, and we'd never been able to get together. And so one day he come to my office there in Morgan, and he says, I've got my buddies coming up to my house tonight at time, and he says, can you be there to meet him? And I says, yeah, I'll be there. And so after work, I went right up to Mark's house, and I can't see you, Mark, but okay, I saw your arm wave there. Anyway, what was there, 6 of us there? Four. Okay, 4 of us showed up at his house by invitation, and his wife, I guess, or maybe Mark had made it. We had some Kool-Aid and cookies, and we sat at the table, and this guy that he knew was there, and the story that she just told about this treasure, he was the second. There was a second pair that got in there. The first pair, for those of you that know George Thompson, those books I had for sale up here, one of those was a George Thompson book. I really like him. He's been dead for a long time now. But George Thompson knew that first pair that she's talking about. And after they had run in with the Indians and so forth, and they decided they would never go back up there. And there's quite a story to it, and I haven't got time to tell all the story about what they did in preparation to going in and looking at all this gold. She read you the waybill. Tremendous amount of gold and silver in there in this cavern. And so after their troubles and that, they went down to George Thompson, who was an author, has a number of books out, some of my favorite books to read. They're real fun. And so George, of course, wanted the story to write up in one of his books, which he did. She was reading out of the book, out of one of his books. And so George collected, or had him tell him the story, and wrote down what he wanted and got the information to write up his story in his book. And then this guy gave George all of their research documentation that for this covered years, and they gave him all the documentation. Well, George went through that and collected a little bit more for his book, and then he gave it to one of his friends who happened to be the guy that Mark was introducing me to. Well, this guy got his partner, and they spent a couple of years researching and doing things, and then they went down and they actually went in and saw the treasure themselves and so forth. And so this was the story that Mark tried for a couple of years to get me to meet up with the guy in that. And so after he's showing me all those things, he, in the conversation, they had a run-in with the Indians also. And he says, and we'll never go back. And I says, well, if you'll never go back, would you mind on a map where all this stuff is? And he said, I wouldn't mind. And that, he thought this was just hot air between a couple of people or whatever. And I says, wait just a minute. And I went out to my car, opened my trunk, and got out my big box of USGS maps of the UNAs. Came in with the map and says, okay, show me right here on this map. And I've got literally drawers full of maps, original maps from people on stories similar to this. But he started out, he put an X up on the side of a hill, and he says, right there is where there's wire gold. He says, it looks a lot like chicken wire for a chicken coop and that. And he says, you go up and you grab hold of it and you kind of shake it and pull on it, and you can pull it out of the rotten rock and that, and you'll get a whole sheet of this solid gold wire out right there. And then he goes over on the creek and he puts an X, and he says, right there's where you're going to go in the underwater trap and swim in to see all these gold bars and everything. And then he went up on the hill and he put an X, and he says, and right there's where the Indians are watching you. They're going to kill you when you go up there. I've got that map. It was drawn for me personally, and I've got quite a few. But that was our very first powwow at Mark's house with 4 of us. And now it's grown into this kind of thing, and feeding people and that. We've had over 200 people that we've fed and different things, but these things have been great. But I hope you're enjoying yourself. Let's take a 10-minute break. Be back about 5 minutes after 9 or so, and we'll get on to our next speaker. Hope you're enjoying yourself.
You guys leaving? No. Where are you guys staying at?
We're staying at the Harrison Inn down in...
All down there. Yeah, that's my son's uncle.
I might mention, Terry will like to know this, Terry Carter. I've been getting phone calls during the presentation from people around the country who are calling me, asking me questions on the phone and that are watching his live presentation on YouTube. It's kind of interesting. So.
So this is live. It's like so many like there could be so many. Oh, it says. Like 300 people. listening to this. That's amazing.
I'm debating whether or not I should try I have one of the giant
The dark path. So,
Let's plug it. Well, yeah, if it goes, tomorrow, let's try plugging it into this outlet
Okay.
here.
Okay.
Or you're plugging it into just the one in there?
Yeah. And can you guys see that okay down there? Or is that too high? You guys can see those pictures right down here?
So, Terry, do you want to know where this is? I know exactly where this is.
Where?
Huh?
Tell John, because he went and looked at it today.
What are you talking about?
And he knows something about it.
Does it recognize us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what about it?
I know where it is.
Oh, really?
I've been researching this for...
It even has that symbol on it?
No, it actually has a dark...
What do you think? I think you lost power.
Dark spot.
I didn't bring my test.
An eye is an opening.
Yes.
An eye is an opening. These are 3 small pothole lakes.
Okay.
This used to be, because I used old geological survey aerial photographs.
Okay.
This used to be
That thing's, my lady said it's kind of like just a little, a little, like freezes up.
Yeah, I think
There's some shit. If I get my phone contact here, it's kind of not connected to you.
Yeah, this ain't very good.
That's what
Yeah, it's...
Our live streams, you have to have it really good.
Yeah, it's...
to make the live stream work and keep up. I'm sure
Yeah,
that's the issue. Is it's
I think
just
so.
not quite getting a good connection. But she said it works, you know. But it just
Cool.
has some little laggers here.
Yeah.
That's looking pretty good.
live stream.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got your plaque in the Tupperware over there.
They were awesome. I love that one. I love it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I got excited about that
Oh
one.
man,
I
I
want
got
to keep
it.
that one.
Yeah, that's cool. The plaque you got. Did you see the plaque you gave me?
I got you one too for being a guest speaker. A special little plaque.
Yeah. It's,
So you were over there, I think, at your store thing. Yeah. When we called everybody, because I gave him one for him. Carter one.
Yeah.
Test, test,
all the
test.
speakers.
Time to get started again. If everybody wants to find their seat, we'll get going here. Hopefully everybody's still here, and we're having a little bit of trouble from time to time, as you know, with our speakers, and it seems like the more we mess with it, the worse it gets, so we're kind of leaving it alone. But Patsy complained a little bit when I turned the spotlight on her, and I need to remind her, I used to play clear back in the 60s. I started playing professionally, playing the guitar, and I had groups and performed by myself and that for quite a few years. And I'd always heard the stuff, whether you're speaking or playing in front of a crowd or that, and they tell you if you don't want stage fright and that kind of thing, that you're supposed to imagine your audience all being naked. You've probably all heard that. If you get the spotlight, it's a little harder to imagine because you can't see anybody. You think those guys up on stage, when you see the rock bands and everybody, that they can see the thousands of fans out there. You can't see anything out there because of the spotlights, as all you see is a big black hole out in there. The only way you can tell they haven't all got bored with what you're doing and got up and gone home is you can hear them breathing. But when you're a little bit quiet, you can hear the breathing. But the spotlight and that, when you're going to be famous, when they put the spotlights on you, you can't see the crowd. So unless they bring the house lights up and everything and that. But anyway, everybody having fun? Some of our friends that are here tonight for the first time from Kansas City came up just a few minutes ago and gave me a bottle of their Kansas City barbecue sauce. And the only reason I'm telling you that, aside from thanks to you guys, is that we're not opposed to accepting presents from everybody, especially if you have maps to large stacks of gold that we can back up to, and with a little bit of help throw them in the back of our pickup truck and take them. So afterwards, if any of you have something like that you want to bring up and give us, we're grateful for those kinds of things. But let's get rolling. John, are you ready? Are you tonight?
It's all ready.
Yeah, okay. So John's going to talk to us now, and he.
Great.
Oh, duh. Okay, Craig. I'm embarrassed now. All right. Here's one of our experts. Now, if I've got this right, tell me if I don't. Didn't you used to live in Vernal and then you moved to Roosevelt? Is that right? Or
Yeah, I grew up in Vernal until I was 15, then we moved to Roosevelt. When I turned 30, moved back to Vernal.
Okay, so I was raised in Vernal, and that's one of the reasons I know a lot about this area and had a lot of connections. But he's going to tell us a history of this area, Moon Lake and so forth, and also tell some treasure tales, as I recall, and that. And what a great guy! And by the way, they've got the Mountain Home. What do you call that?
Home Lodge.
Mountain Home Lodge. They've got that. It's a bed and breakfast. Really neat place. If any of you want to do a getaway, you can't do it now because it's booked up. Sorry about that. But come up and get a bed and breakfast with them. We did a barbecue in the backyard and everything, but it's a neat little spot. And then they've also got the lodge up at Moon Lake, right? And they rent out the cabins and that. So after the flood's done, if there's still a Moon Lake left and a Moon Lake campground and lodge when it's through flooding, come on up and also check them out there. They're great people. He and his wife been really helpful. We're going to turn it over. Let's give a big hand for Greg.
All right, as Kent said, we bought the resort at Moon Lake in 2019, end of 2019. This is our second summer. We've had it about a year and a half now. And when Mark approached me about having this at Moon Lake, he's always had it at Morgan. This is the 22nd year. And he asked me if we could do it at Moon Lake. And I'm like, yeah, how many people are you going to have? And he said, oh, 200, 250. I thought, well, we can do that. I think we got room for that. And as it went on, and Terry got involved with his YouTube channel, and we started getting people calling from all over the country. And it's amazing when everybody raised their hand how many are not from the basin here. So we started thinking, we might have to move it. We might not have room up there at Moon Lake, and honestly, we might be able to fit everybody in up there that's here, but we just don't have the parking. And the Forest Service kind of frowned on the parking outside of our resort. So that's why the gathering at Moon Lake is not at Moon Lake. It's here. It's because we just don't have the room, and that's all because of you guys, and we're so grateful that you came and showed up from all over the place. It's amazing. But even though we're not at Moon Lake, I want to talk a little bit about the history of Moon Lake. Just real quick, the lodge, the first lodge was built in 1927, and the first permit. So you have a permit from the Forest Service to operate a lodge. Ours is 20 years, and so the first lodge, the first permit was issued in 1927. The first lodge was built in about 1925. The first permit, and then the lodge was built in 1927. And you can see that in the top left picture there. It burnt down in about 1934. Then it was, some say it was rebuilt down by where Brown Duck Creek comes into Moon Lake, the original Moon Lake before the dam. And then it burned down, and some say it was rebuilt in the same spot. Some say it wasn't. Either way, it was moved. They started building the dam at Moon Lake in 1935, and it was finished in 1938. So they moved. If they did rebuild the lodge, it was moved up to the present location of where it's at now, and all the cabins were moved. Then over the years, it's changed hands several times. More cabins have been built. The lodge has been added onto until it looks. That's what it looked like after they added on to it. And then today is, we just took those pictures just the other day, just yesterday. So that's what it looks like today. And in 2000, the previous owners that we got it from, Bill and Julie Reardon, took over ownership of it, and then in 2019 my wife and I bought it, and so we've just loved the area. There's a picture of the inside. If you haven't been up there, it's just gorgeous. We have 15 cabins up there. The lodge. We've got ice cream and snacks and all kinds of stuff for camping supplies. These are some of the cabins. These are some pictures of what it looks like. The lake right now is really low because we just didn't have the snow last winter. Can you hear me if I talk really loud? It was when we bought it in 2020. They always drain it down for the irrigation in the fall, and in the spring the snow melts and comes up. This year it didn't even come up. There just wasn't enough snow, so everything melted and the lake stayed low. So if you go up there now, it's really low. We had a fire in 2019, our first year that we owned the lodge, and now we have flooding. When it rains, there's nothing to hold the water back, and so the campground's shut down, as probably many of you know who had camp spots there. But the lodge is still fine. So the cabins are fine, and we're still open up there. This Moon Lake story goes way back to even before the white man came. The Indians have superstitions about it. Even to this day, we don't see very many Native Americans at Moon Lake. At least none of the locals come up there very often. And stopped in at Moon Lake, or the Mountain Home Lodge the other day, and so I was asking them, what's your, how come we never see you guys up there at Moon Lake? And you got superstitions about that? And they kind of chuckled and said, well, some of us believe that there's a giant moose that lives in the lake, and if you're not careful, it will grab you and pull you down under the water. And so I have here some stories written by some early pioneers of the valley, and this one talks about a story from the Indians.
Put a spotlight on you so they can see this.
Sure. So I just want to read this real quick. So this was by a local named Jesse Bird. It says, the Indian death ritual had ended. The body of the chief was secured in the big canoe. Only 4 braves could journey across the lake to sacred burial grounds. 2 medicine men, an honored warrior, and the chief's eldest son. The entire tribe had traveled from home ground for over a week of mourning for the dead chief. Ancestor had chosen the burial ground that lay across the moon-shaped lake. There were no trails around it. The path was straight across the lake by canoe. The rain had fallen since the tribe gathering, which to the tribe meant the sky god was sorrowed with their loss. Slowly the canoe pulled from the shore. Large fires surrounded by dancing members wailed the death song behind. The ceremony would continue until all were back on shore. 1 medicine man in front and 1 behind the corpse chanted low rattling charms and sacred powder over the dead chief. The paddles silently, swiftly parted the water surface until they had reached the far side. Quickly a lift was made and decorated with charms and pipes. Ceremoniously the body was raised. Momentarily the drums stopped as his white stallion was slain, its spirit released to run away with the high rider. Then the chants began again. The started back. As the sky seemed to darken, the water became still, the rain ceased, a haunting stillness filled the air. The paddlers quickened their pace. Midway across the calm water, the tribal members stared in horror as a large hand came up under the canoe. The monstrous hand clutched the passengers and pulled them under the water. On the shore, the drums ceased and everyone ran to the water's edge. There was nothing to be seen, nothing, no bodies, no survivors surfaced. It was as if the boat and people had never been. The old medicine man gathered his people and led them away. An evil spirit had claimed the water and condemned the burial ground. Never again would any member come to the water's edge, for death lay beyond. To this day, few Indians venture near Moon Lake. And then, there's stories from some of the locals that were some of the locals. What do you talk real loud? Comes back to life. So this is Jenny Bolton. This is her story. She's one of the pioneers. Her family was. So it starts quick. Go faster. It is following us. Boating on Moon Lake has always been a favorite thing of mine to do. That is until that day. Things had been going great. My husband had been promoted to manager of the computer company that he worked for, and we had a new baby. We were a very happy family. It was a nice day on the lake. The clouds were white and fluffy like little fluffs of pillows. The wind was calm as the still night's breeze. The kids were getting ready to go riding on the water. They were having the time of their lives. We saw something out in the distance, but we really didn't think anything of it. We went on with our boating activities. After lunch, we were back out on the lake, and the children were looking at the lake. They saw the strange-looking thing again. This time it was following the boat. The faster we went, the faster it went. We didn't know what to do. The thought of getting off the lake ran through our minds. We went for it, but as soon as we went toward the shore, the thing went and blocked our way. As we got closer, we could tell this was no ordinary giant fish. It was a black, ugly, bumpy, monster-looking thing. By then, I was terrified. We didn't want to make the monster mad, so we decided to stay out on the lake for a little while longer. Time passed, and the monster held its ground. Getting tired of just sitting there, we decided that we would try to make an escape. When we tried to get away, the monster came up to our boat and tried to capsize it. Our boat almost tipped over, and some of our children nearly went overboard. What would I do if I lost any of my children? The rocking boat had all of us scared to death. It was all we could do to sit and calmly wait for some help or something to happen. It was getting close to nightfall, and the sun was beginning to go down. The children were getting restless, but we were too scared to even try to go to sleep. At last, another boat came out on the lake. They were coming to our rescue. The boat tried to distract the monster while we raced to shore. The other boat followed closely behind, with the monster on its tail. Soon, however, the monster disappeared under the water at about 300 yards out. We immediately packed up and left Moon Lake, and to this day we have never returned or gone boating anywhere else. So the previous owner of Moon Lake, I won't read the whole thing, but he said he got up one morning and he was sitting on the deck and drinking his coffee of the lodge, and he saw a wake go across the lake, just under the water, and it was just odd shaped wake, and then a couple of weeks later he saw the same thing. My own experience with Mooney, the Moon Lake Monster, is when my brother and I, this was way before we owned the lodge, my brother and I went backpacking up to Audison Basin up past Moon Lake. And instead of hiking the 2 miles from the lake, from the trailhead to the top of the lake, we decided we'd get in our canoe and canoe to the top, and then walk, and then backpack from there. So we did, and then on the return, coming back, it was late at night when we got late in the afternoon when we got to the lake, and it was just starting to get dark, and we got everything loaded in the canoe, and we shoved off, and we started paddling out, and before we got too far, it was totally dark, like this, no moon. And so we were just paddling along, and every now and then we could hear this sip sound of a fish taking a fly off the water, and we knew that was a fish. And so we paddled along, not really knowing where we were going because we couldn't see. And we finally come around the corner of the lake, and we could see the lodge. And we corrected our paddling and headed straight for the lights of the cabins. And it's pitch black, and all of a sudden we hear this sound that wasn't a fish. It was something big moving in the water. And my brother and I both look at each other, and we're as if to say, "Did you hear that?" But we were both too scared to say, "Was that the Moon Lake Monster?" And so we just instinctively started paddling faster and faster, and got back, and we were just relieved to get back to the shore. But another legend that's told around the campfire of Moon Lake is what place wouldn't be complete without its ghost stories. So we have a ghost of Moon Lake, and I'll read this. So Moon Lake is a beautiful spot. I found this on the internet. I haven't seen this. I talked to people who have seen this girl. Moon Lake is a beautiful spot in the high Uintas north of Duchesne, but when you visit, you might encounter the ghost of a young girl. She appears in broad daylight, and you might see her while you're walking through the woods around the lake, or even sitting on the banks. The little girl will come up to you, sobbing and asking for your help. She appears to be about 7 years old. The child is soaked, as though she's fallen in the lake. She's shivering, and her lips are blue from the cold. Of course, you want to help her, so you reach out, take her hand, and she vanishes right in front of you. If you've been drinking a few beers while fishing, you might think you've had a few too many, But you should know that you're not the first to witness this ghost. She's been appearing to campers and hikers for years, each time soaking wet and shivering, and each time disappearing into thin air right in broad daylight. Some campers don't like to see the little girl, but they hear her. Or some campers don't see the little girl, but they do hear her. If you've ever visited one of Utah's lakes, then you know how sound travels across the water. While you're walking around near the lake during the day, you might hear sobs of a child or loud splashing as if something has fallen in the lake. When you try to locate where the sounds are coming from, you'll be unsuccessful. As darkness descends over the lake and campgrounds, things get even quite creepier. The sunsets here are stunning, so enjoy them before you settle into your tent for the night. You're not likely to get much sleep here. As you snuggle into your sleeping bag, you'll hear the little nighttime noises of the wilderness, the hoot of an owl, the rustling of a mouse or chipmunk in the underbrush near your tent, and maybe an ear-piercing scream. You'll bolt upright and search for your headlamp, but when you step outside, you'll see nothing. But a few moments after you settle back into the tent, more screams, accompanied by the sound of splashing in the water nearby. If you walk down to the lake, all will appear calm in the moonlight. Later, you might hear footsteps running right across your campsite. It's going to be a long night at Moon Lake. It's said that the young girl that you've seen and heard drowned in the lake years ago and haunts it today. While some campers never hear or see anything unusual at Moon Lake, others report the same stories. And I was up there just the other day. I'd never heard this before. Employees were saying, yeah, and there's a haunted cabin too. I'm like, what? They said, yeah, and I won't tell you what's number because nobody will ever rent it again. But they said, this cabin, they've been in there cleaning, and things will like move around and disappear, and even the propane stove will just light on itself, all by itself. So there must be something to these ghost stories. But wind has dried my throat out today. So we've talked a little bit about Bigfoot today. I've got a Bigfoot story also at Moon Lake. This is written by another early pioneer. Starts out, hey Josh, said Fred, eager to go home. It's getting late. Let's call it a day. Yeah, Fred, it's getting a little chilly and late too, answered Josh. And I'm about starved plumb to death. The four men left their work of cleaning the drain pipe at Moon Lake Dam and headed for the cabins about a mile away. It turned out to be a cold walk. In the late November night. As the men topped the dam, Josh said to Kit, is there something out there on the ice? I don't know. It kind of looks like a person with a child, said Kit. What does it look like to you? Asked Jack. Fred said, let's yell and see if it'll answer back. All three called across the lake. Hey, out there. The creature turned, looked, and took off running toward the north end of the lake. Maybe we should follow them and see if they need help, said Fred. That's a good idea, said Josh. The four men dropped their equipment and started chasing the creature. They found long, coarse, stiff brown hair that stuck in the ice and snow. An eerie feeling came over the men. They turned and ran for home. The men were exhausted by the time they reached the cabin. What do you think that was? Jack asked. I don't mean to sound superstitious, but I think it was a Sasquatch, answered Kit. The other two men agreed. They told their story. Two men at the head of the Upper Country Water District. Many men did not believe them, but the Upper Country Water District could not replace the crew all winter long. No one has ever found out what the creature was, but many believe it was a Sasquatch. In the 1980s, Lloyd Barton was doing a lot of hunting and trapping in the Uinta Mountains and 9 Mile Canyon. One day he jumped off some rocks that had fallen from the canyon wall. Carved on the large cliff of a petroglyph of a huge hairy creature that was standing upright. The animal had one Indian grasped in a hand-like paw, while the other tiny Indians were shooting miniature arrows at the monster. Lloyd reports that the picture can be easily relocated in 9 Mile Canyon. This sighting lends some validity to the Sasquatch stories. So, Moon Lake also has many, many tales and legends of treasure. Patsy alluded to some today. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those. Patsy told you a little bit about Chief Wakara. He's pictured on the top left there, and how he made a deal with Brigham Young to show the Brigham where the gold was, and then they picked. The story was that Wakara saw them coming in a dream, and he was told to show him where the gold was, and the person that he saw in the dream when Brigham and the first group finally arrived was a guy he recognized, and his name was Isaac Morley. And Wakara said, "I'm supposed to show you where the gold is," and Isaac said, "Well, I'm too old. I can't go trekking around the mountains." And so, as Patsy said, they picked a younger man that they could trust, and his name was Thomas Rhodes. So Thomas went many times and got gold from the mountains. But a little bit of trivia about Chief Wakara, and we're going to change history a little bit here, because all the history books say that Wakara was Ute. Wakara was actually Shoshone. And that the guy on the right is Chief Tabby, and the guy at the bottom right is Chief Antero. They're all brothers of Chief Wakara. And that handsome lady at the bottom left is Chief Wakara's sister. Her name is Tavat. She went by Dora in English. And she's also my 4th great grandma. So Chief Wakara took, he had some braves take Thomas Rhodes and go find this gold, and they brought back several loads for the church. And some of that was minted into coins, and some of it, they say, was put on the angel Moroni at the top of the temple and so forth, and inside the temple, and whatever the church needed it for. But nobody really knew where Thomas Rhodes went. And Thomas Rhodes went and did it till he did it till he couldn't do it anymore, and then they chose Caleb Rhodes to go do it and bring the gold back. And Caleb Rhodes supposedly found at least 7 more mines in his travels back and forth, and and true to both their words, they never told anybody where these mines were at. They took it to their grave, and so nobody knew. And so that's the legend. That's where the legend of the Lost Rhodes mine came from. Is when they died, the location of those mines was never found. There is a map called the Copper Map that was found in the church archives, supposedly, and it's been and this is in Dale Bascom's book. He's got close-up pictures of it. This has been highly blurred, so you can't really see it. But if you get Dale Bascom's book, you can see certain portions of it and read more about it. But supposedly this map was in the church archives, and it's carved on a copper sheet of copper, and it shows the location of the place that Caleb Rhodes went and got the gold, and it shows Moon Lake clearly, and so this mine is in the vicinity of Moon Lake. These carvings are on trees that are near Moon Lake. The carving on the right Carving on the left, you can see a hatchet mark at the bottom there, but the carving on the right looks like, and it's still there today, it survived the fire, but it looks like, kind of like an owl, if you got a good imagination. But a friend of mine went up and he did some core drilling on each side of that and found out that it's really a heart, that the sides have grown in over it, and the heart is a Spanish symbol, because this was originally a Spanish mine that Caleb and Thomas went and originally got the gold from. So it was originally a Spanish mine. So that heart is a Spanish symbol depicting the mine. So it is right in the area where this copper map shows. Another mine in the area of Moon Lake is I made a new friend this year. He came to stay at the Mountain Home Lodge, and he came up. He's from out of town. He came up and said that he wanted to find this mine that his dad had found many years ago. And he just started describing it to me and asking me about it and if I knew where it was and if I could take him to it. And I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what mine that is. I know right where it is and I can take you to it. So we went up, and supposedly using the map at the top right there, he is what he used to find that mine. But I've also heard that there was an Indian that knew where this mine was that helped him find it and took him up and showed him it. But that's what the mine looked like several years ago. That hole is closed off now. So I took him up, and this mine is in the books, and I found it many years ago. And I took this guy up, and I won't say his name, and he asked me to be very discreet about it. And I showed it to him, and he told me some really fantastic stuff about what his dad actually found in that mine, and how he got down in there and he actually got some gold out of there. Another mine that is in the vicinity of Moon Lake, and maybe some of you will recognize this picture, is, I won't say the name of this mine either, but it's up in the vicinity of Moon Lake. The people that had this mine, as the story goes, they got some information from an Indian that there's a shaft that goes down 80 feet and it turns and goes sideways. And so they went up and apparently found the shaft easily, went down in it and started excavating, and they actually shored it up, and they put, I don't know how they did it, but they got some like 5-foot round culvert pipe, and as they dug down, they put that pipe in there, and it went down 80 feet or so. And years ago, I went down in that. It's got a metal ladder that's down there, and my brothers and I went all the way to the bottom, and there is a shaft that goes to the side. We only went a short ways because it was pretty, it was old and the timber didn't look that great, so we didn't go very far. So those are a couple of mines that are in the Moon Lake area that I'm aware of. Another story that a guy told me this year was that he was up at a lake in the mountains up above Moon Lake, and when he was, I don't know how old he was younger, and he was walking along the lake fishing, and he saw this, what looked like a brick, it looked like just a brick down in the water. So he got a stick and he was trying to get it out. It was about 10 feet deep, and it was hard to keep the stick down in the water, but he tried to pull it and wiggle and get that brick up, and it was heavy. Finally, after about an hour, he said he gave up because he had to get back to camp. And then he later learned that somebody had gone up after him and got 703 silver bars out of that lake. and he said it keeps kicking himself ever since. For not trying harder. So when you're a treasure hunter, especially looking for Spanish treasure, it's like the story of when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, sometimes when you're a Spanish treasure hunter, everything looks Spanish. So you have to be careful about some of the things that you see and read and the stories that you hear. I went up, I read a story in one of the books, and it told about some a Spanish camp and cabins and a smelter, and I'm like, wow, I know right where that is. I know that area, so I think I can go find it. So I went up and I hiked all over and crisscrossed, and I come out in this meadow and I found these cabins. I found that smelter, and I walked along, and I'm like, whoa! I found something Spanish. It's awesome. And as I kept walking along, and I go to one cabin, and I'm like, man, I'm going to find a breastplate, or I'm going to find a Spanish helmet, or sword, or something. There was metal stuff laying around. I'm like, there's got to be something here. And so I go from one cabin to the other. And I got to clear to the other end, and I found this. Since the authors of the book had been up there, the Forest Service has been up and put up this plaque in commemoration of this sawmill that was built up in that area. So it wasn't Spanish at all. Another story I read is a bell, a Spanish bell that's been found. You might have seen the story in the books too, but it's 1878. It's got a cross on it. It just totally looks Spanish. And so one day I was up here in the mountains above Timothy Lakes, and I'm going through this meadow, and I look down, and there's a bell laying there in the just halfway buried in the grass. So I pull it up and I clean it off, and I'm like, I found a Spanish bell. I took it home and I put it on my shelf, and I got one of these bells that's in that book. And then years later, I found out my neighbor, he's got one just like it. So I go over and look at it, and I'm like, So I start digging into it, and right on the side it said Saint-Léger, 1878, Saint-Léger, if I'm pronouncing that right. And so by then the internet was a thing, so I'd Google it, Google wasn't even around, it was whatever, but I searched for it. I found Saint-Léger as a city in Switzerland. And so I'm like, Spanish? So maybe this isn't Spanish, it's Swiss or something. So I kept doing research, and in fact I wrote to the city of Saint-Léger in Switzerland, and they wrote me back and said, there's a foundry here that used to make these bells, and that summer I just happened to be going to Europe on a trip, and so I made a little detour and went through Saint-Léger, and I saw where this foundry was, and I met with the Chamber of Commerce there, and they had all this information for me. And it turns out that this bell, the mold was made in Saint-Léger, and it was somehow somebody brought it to the United States at some point. And a company, I think it was Sears or some company, got a hold of it and mass-produced thousands of them. And so what I found out is they've been found all over the United States. Canada, they've been everywhere. So you have to really take a lot of the stuff that you read in the books and that people tell you with a grain of salt. But that doesn't mean that there's not things out there to find. A friend of mine brought over and showed me this is not what he showed me. I don't have permission to show his pictures. But I found one on the internet that's just like it, and he's the one that he brought over and let me take pictures of is really, I mean, it's not much left of it. It's really rusted and in pieces, but it's a little Spanish pistol like this that's been found in the area, and really ornate. It's beautiful. It's inlaid with silver in the handle, and just a beautiful piece. And that was found around here. Another friend of mine showed me a necklace that he's got with a Spanish coin that he found in the area on it. And Patsy will recognize this. She took me up and showed me this several years ago. These are crosses, or what's left of a cross. It probably stood 8 feet tall. It was out in the meadow. Patsy took me up and showed me one that was just right off the side of the road. And I remember seeing a map in one of the books that showed 3 crosses in that area. So another time I went up and thought, well, I'm going to go find those other crosses. Sure enough, as I went out through the meadow, I found 4 more crosses, which didn't match the map, so I wasn't sure. But they were all in pretty bad shape, but you could tell that they used to be a cross. And they're all laid in a straight line right out through that meadow, and they pointed to a mine that's up on that hill. And another mine that's up in the area, up in the Hyunas, up above Moon Lake, that I found this just hiking, and took these pictures of it. And I found over the years, I have found lots and lots of mines up in the Hyunas. Just through sheer just getting out and hiking, and my brothers and I, we just put on our backpacks. In fact, we went up this year and found, well, a friend of mine showed us one, and we found another mine that we had never seen before. Just got to get out and hike. And so there's stuff up there in the Hyunas to be found. And by the way, another bit of trivia, if you want to know how the Hyunas or the Hyuna Mountains got their name is that, as the story goes, there was a bunch of the early mountain men come out here, and they were trapping, and they were up in these mountains up here. Been up there several weeks hiking around, and they kind of got lost, and was wondering where they were, what was the best route to get out of the mountains, and they came across a bunch of Indians up there, and so they went up to them, and in their best sign language, they said, "Where are we?" And not knowing that the Indians spoke English, and the Indians looked at each other like, that's a dumb question. Finally, one of them turned to the trappers and says, "You in the mountains." And so that's how the Hyuna Mountains got their name. So this mine was shown to me by a friend, and he was going to take us up and show us this mine that was open. And last time he was there, it was open, but over time, with freezing and thawing and stuff, the rocks just come down, and so when we got up there, it was covered up. And so you never know if these mines are worth opening up. You just, like I said, I found many mines that they're all covered. You never know if what's underneath. Is there gold still there? Did they get it all? It's always a guess. These mines, there's 2 of them on this hillside. This is 2 that Patsy also showed me. And I'm just showing you stuff that's around the Moon Lake area. These are up on a hillside. They're also covered up, filled in. And this These look like they're filled in on purpose, so I don't know. I do know that the Indians went around after a certain point in time, and they covered up all the mines and that they could and hid them. All right, that's all I have. If you know, a lot of times you get out there and you just, you know, I've spent a lot of time hiking and looking and following stories, and I've never really found anything that's really valuable other than the true treasure of the mountains, and treasure hunting is the friends that you make and the time you spend up in the high country and in the mountains, and so sometimes that's all you get out of it, and a lot of times that's all you need. But if any of you are around, we have a get together at the Moon Lake Lodge every Tuesday, the first Tuesday of every month. Just treasure hunters getting out and sharing their stories. So if any of you are around on the first Tuesday of the month, you're welcome to come up to the lodge and hang out. And it starts at 6, and sometimes we have a few guys and sometimes we have more, but you're welcome to come. I don't know if you wanted to do a question and answer. I don't know if I'll have any answers, but did we have any? Do you want to do a question? Do we have time for that?
Let's do probably do a little bit of open mic.
Okay. Thank you.
Remember, you can corner these people and ask them some one-on-one questions and that too. And tonight you might not get a chance if it gets too late, but tomorrow corner these people and share some stories with them. That one-on-one, sometimes you can get a lot more information, a lot more details than that. But okay, it's getting fairly late, but would like a few people maybe to come up and share some quick stories. Is Alien Dave still here? Alien Dave, come on up. We've had a couple of questions. We've had some people that want to know about, I think we've had a few people maybe abducted out of the crowd today by some UFOs. You may not have seen them, but we've got Alien Dave here, who's a real expert on this stuff, and boy, does he have some interesting stories. And so, Alien Dave, if you'd come up and spend a few minutes, if you don't mind, and tell us a couple of your... He was just beamed down. Anyway, he's got some great stories. We might as well hear it, because the basin is a hot spot in the world, if you don't know that, for UFOs and that, and I could tell you some stories on that too, but Alien Dave knows way more than I do about this stuff. So go ahead with a few minutes and share a couple stories with us, if you wouldn't mind. Alien Dave, let's give him a hand.
A lot of you might know me from the website, or maybe you've seen me on TV, but I would like to share tonight, because we are near Moon Lake. I'd like to share my Bigfoot experience that I've had here in Moon Lake when I was 17. We were camping at Moon Lake for about a week, and on day 2, we decided to hike up to the Brown Duck and do some fly fishing. So we left early in the morning, and we hiked up, and then we noticed this pack train coming up with horses and mules, and they had a couple dogs with them. And we noticed the dogs were looking that way the whole time they were walking. They were just staring in that direction as they were walking up. We kind of noticed that, and we mentioned it to each other. We said, "Did you notice the dogs were looking at the same way that we've been hearing this noise?" And so it was just kind of one of those things you just kind of notice, but kind of throw it in the back of your mind. And so we just kept walking. But as soon as we couldn't hear the horses anymore, we heard that bark, like grunt again. And then we heard a big twig break or big branch break. And so we looked over there, and as you know, if you've ever been up in that area, it's pretty thick. And so you can't see back very far. And so we kind of looked that way after seeing or hearing that branch break, and we seen 2 Bigfoot just over this little rise walking back into the woods. So all we seen was like mid-back up, but one was bigger than the other. The tall one was like a blackish brown, and the smaller one was kind of reddish. And it was no neck. You could see the muscles moving and stuff as the sun was coming through the trees. And we watched it for maybe, I don't know, 8-9 seconds. And then we looked at each other and we were like, did you, of course, like, did you just see that? I mean, do you just see what I seen? And so we were like, yeah. And so we kind of just started huffing down the mountain real quick because we didn't want to mess with it. And the odd thing was, we were there at Moon Lake for another 5 days. And that night when we got back down into camp, the ranger came up and was trying to warn us about bears in the area to keep your food, 10, 12 years until we met each other again and we had that memory. And so what I thought was odd too is we used to hold monthly UFO meetings with Marley Spenlove in Salt Lake for MUFON. We kind of shared meetings with them, and we would have speakers come in. And one time we had a Indian chief come in from the Navajo Nation, and he was speaking on Bigfoot. And he was telling us that there was like 3 different types of Bigfoot, and one of the Bigfoot makes you forget. And I thought that was really odd. And I said, well, what do you mean it makes you forget? And he says, well, they're telepathic, and if you see them, they can kind of put that in your mind just to, forget about it. And I says, well, that's kind of what happened to us up at Moon Lake. I thought, it's like kind of strange. And then another incident that I had with Bigfoot was out in the West Desert, because I am always out in the West Desert looking for UFOs with Dugway, Area 52 area. And we had gotten contacted by a lady who's riding horses and stuff out there, and she was coming across all these Bigfoot track, which I thought was really strange being out in the desert. So I was super interested in this, and she had some really good photographs and stuff. So we went to the area and we started looking around, and right away we started finding track, and not just big track, but little track, just all sorts of size track out there. So we started GPSing the track, and we'd feed it into a topo map program on the computer. And when we put in all the data, we was like, well, look, there's a trail. And so we went back and we used the GPS, and we was like, oh yeah, there is a trail. And we started finding track all along this trail, and it led up to this vantage point, and it wasn't really even the highest vantage point around. It was just a kind of a good location to see the entrance to the canyon up there. And we noticed that the track would come all up one way, and they would stand in one direction and then go back down the same. So we started doing experiments, and we'd, rake it clean, leave an apple or some marbles or something to try to see if it might get taken. And over the months that we were out there at that first season, nothing got taken, but there was always new track. And we would stand there and we was like, okay, what are they looking at? Because they're all facing one direction. And the only thing that's out there is Dugway and the depot. And so we're like, are they watching Dugway too? Are they watching the UFOs? Or what is the purpose of them coming up here and doing this? And so we kept that location, well, it's still secret, but we keep it pretty secret because we're finding out that they're using that area a certain time of year, and then they migrate south. And so a year and a half or so has gone by, and the lady had contacted me and said, how's the investigation going? And we told her, we have a couple independent researchers out there that are keeping the secret, that are doing their own thing. It was a former bounty hunter and a former retired sheriff from Twilla. And we all kind of came to the same conclusion that there was some kind of family unit living out there at a certain time of year. But to make a long story short, the lady had called me about a year and a half after we started the investigation. She says, have you ever went out there at night? And I says, why would I do that? And she says, well, you might just see something if you do that, because that's when I have the most experiences out there as far as a visual sighting. So about 3 days later, I had got in the Blazer and went out there, and I got there just as the sun was going down. It was just starting to get dark, and I parked in my usual spot, and I got my camera equipment together, and as soon as I stepped out of the Blazer, I heard in my head, over here. And it wasn't like I looked around, I looked right at it. And it was up on the hill, up by the cemetery, and it was rocking back and forth like, here I am. And it did that for like 3-4 seconds, and it knew I seen it, and then it went down on all fours and was gone. And I thought to myself, that's the same type of thing that this chief was saying, that the Bigfoot's telepathic and would make you forget, or in this case, it wanted me to see it. Strange reason, but I wasn't going to go up there after I seen it because it was getting dark, and of course I was unarmed, but I just thought I would share that experience because I'm so close to Moon Lake here, and when I was at 17, that was one of the things that stuck with me for my entire life, more or less, was that sighting of Bigfoot at Moon Lake. But I have tons of stories. If anybody wants to talk to me afterwards about UFOs, about Space Wolf Research or Skinwalker Ranch, we do own property next to Skinwalker Ranch now called Space Wolf Research. We're up on the hill. It's the southern vantage point, so we actually have a better view of Skinwalker Ranch than they do. And we've found some pretty interesting things there over the years and had some crazy experiences there too. But I'm going to let it go to someone else now, and hit me up tomorrow or something. I'll be around.
Thanks, Dave. It's getting pretty late. You want to hear a couple more just volunteers? Or are you ready to go home to bed?
Got one right here.
All right. Obviously, any of you can leave anytime you want. The guards have gone now, so you're welcome to leave. We were holding here hostage before, but okay, we got a story over here. Come on. All right, another. By the way, these people, you probably realize we didn't invite them as guest speakers or that. They're just up out of the audience with their stories and that. We appreciate them. Go ahead.
My name is Kelly Bird, and my family's been involved with Moon Lake for a lot of years. I grew up there. My dad was caretaker at the dam for 27 years. My grandfather was involved in the construction of Moon Lake, was a guard there during the Second World War, and was also caretaker. Moon Lake is a deep lake. It's a cold lake. And there's been lots of strange things go on over time. There's been several people drowned there that have never been found. And my dad was involved back in the 50s. He helped drag for bodies and things when they disappeared. When Moon Lake, all the water has been drained out of the dam that you can drain out, the natural part of the lake is still 125 feet deep. There's rumors that it's bottomless. Dad had 100 feet of cable and 25 foot of lariat or 30 foot of lariat rope, and he could touch bottom everywhere. They tried several times. They dumped dye in the lake, at the head of the lake, and it never showed up on the surface, but 2 hours later it would come out the outlet works down at the bottom. They brought in a diver at one time. They had a barge on the lake. Dad was on the barge when the diver went down. He went down 20 feet and went into hysterics, and they brought him up, and he wouldn't go back down in the lake again. He claimed that he saw a fish that was the size of a man. But anyway, when I was in high school, I had a track coach over here, and when my dad retired from the caretaker job, this man took the job for a few years. And we were headed to a track meet, riding in the car, and somehow the subject came up, and he said, Moon Lake's bottomless. And no, it isn't, because you know I knew the history of what went on there, and yes it is, no it isn't, yes it is, and this went on for quite a little while. And I finally, well, what makes you think that Moon Lake's bottomless? He said, well, let me tell you. I stepped out on the porch of the house one morning, it was daylight, I looked out there on the lake, it was calm, and pretty soon there was this little ripple on the water, and up stuck this Chinaman's head, and he looked around, back down he went. But anyway, I have lots of stories and things. I'll be around tomorrow evening too if you want to catch up with me. I know a lot of history and stuff, and I've collected stuff since I was a teenager, and I'm in the process of putting a history book together for Moon Lake. So if anybody knows any history or anything or stories that you may be interested to get with me, because I'm trying to collect anything I can to put this together. But anyway, I appreciate you letting me have the time. Thank you very much.
Hello there, my name is Gil Lujan. I come from Port Angeles, Washington. And one of the interesting things that just recently happened. Oh, over here? Okay. Anyway, my name is Gil Lujan. I came from Port Angeles, Washington. And this past May, we were coming through southern Utah, down by St. George. And we went and stayed out in, what is it? The wilderness there. Anyway, what do they call it? Beaver Dam Wilderness?
Stories at times, but having small kids, I don't get to do it as much as I want. So I do a lot more of like research on the internet. And a few years ago, I had the privilege of holding an artifact. It's in one of the treasure hunting books. It's a lead cross that has a little gold nugget in it. And the gold nugget is supposed to signify where a rich treasure is. And on this cross, there are directions, and there's, it talks about the Utes, like the Native Americans, and the mountains, and it's basically like a map on this lead cross. And I've been able to hold this lead cross myself, examine it, study it, been able to take it, draw pictures of it, and I've gone home and I've tried to really research and figure out what like the Spanish on it translated to, and a lot of other people have tried translating it, and everyone comes up like dead ends, like we just don't know what this says. However, there was one day, finally, I got a little bit of a clue, I guess. It didn't really go too far, but I am sharing because it's a dead end for me. Hopefully, maybe someday someone could take it and go a little bit further. But when I was researching different phrases on the lead cross, up came some websites that were talking about some stone cutters that were on an island outside of Spain, and they were famous for their skill, and they were really well renowned in their area. And to keep their skill set valuable, to keep like job security, they created code words and codes for all of their skill sets, their techniques, and they basically spoke in code so that all of the other stonecutter companies, this is like 1700s, but the companies around them, that they couldn't steal their style and then continue on. And one of the phrases on the cross was one of their code words. I could not, it's all code and secret, and I don't know how to, I haven't been able to figure out the translation of their secret code, but it was like this little bit of...
Tomorrow night, during the daytime, I'm sure there'll be people here at the park and maybe over to Greg's place in Mountain Home, or I don't know, but probably a lot of stories being passed around and that, so you might look for some groups either here or over to Greg's place and see if there's groups during the daytime and that. Typical of our powwows, there may be people still here at 2 o'clock in the morning. A lot of groups around, and chat with one another and that. And so that's all up to you. But basically, that's it for tonight. We'll see you all tomorrow night for continuing. If a few of you can help me take down all the PA system and get it in my car, I'd appreciate it. It'd take a few minutes, but